Orders of the day.
Government orders, government bills. Second reading debate on Bill C-87, Poverty Reduction Act.
Ms. Duncan, Copacook North, for Mr. Duclos, seconded by Ms. McKenna, moves that Bill C-87, an act respecting the reduction of poverty, be now read a second time and referred to the Standing Committee on Human Resources, Skills and Social Development and the Status of Persons with Disabilities. Debate. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Families, Children and Social Development.
Mr. Speaker, it's with great pleasure that I rise to address the House today with respect to this bill. The Minister and I had the honour of launching a chance for everyone, a poverty reduction strategy. And today, by tabling this bill, that strategy will become a reality. A Chance for All is our response to what Canadians told us about possible solutions to poverty and how to fight it.
We've been talking to people across the country to inform the development of our national poverty strategy. We've consulted people working on the front lines, researchers, Indigenous partners, and most importantly, people with lived experience themselves. They've been telling us about the reality of struggling to make ends meet and satisfy basic needs. Essential things such as providing for the needs of one's children or taking care of one's health are simply out of reach for far too many people in this country. We heard about the plight of vulnerable people, namely seniors, youth, women, the LGBTQ2 community, racialized people, newcomers, persons with disabilities, single parents. It's a tragically long list. We heard that the poverty reduction strategy should acknowledge the challenges faced by these specific groups and contain targeted policies and supports that specifically support them in the lives they lead and in their achievements towards ending their poverty in their lives. And we received ideas and insights into different ways to fight poverty. Bill C-87 is this attempt to do two things. First and foremost, it sets a poverty line right across the country. And it does so in a way that's never been done before. It's not simply a measurement of income against the norm or against the achievable, but it sets a poverty line by looking at a basket of goods, some consumer goods such as housing or food or transportation, but also it rates things like access to health care, access to education, participation and meaningful participation in democratic change within communities. The poverty line is set across the country, but most importantly, it's also regionalized across the country in different centres and different urban settings. And that's because poverty is experienced, measured, felt, and understood differently in different communities. We are also working with Indigenous communities to make sure that poverty reflects their experience and comprehension of what constitutes poverty, and measures the basket of goods that they consider critical to a good life in this country. Because understanding it in detail, from region to region, from community to community, from subpopulation to subpopulation, from nation to nation to nation in this country, is critical if we're going to attack it and lift people out of poverty and transform the lives of Canadians. I want to say that this project is also about making investments. And I know that there have been some that have worried that the announcement of the poverty strategy wasn't attached to a major new set of spending initiatives. And there's good reason for that. Our work on eliminating poverty didn't begin with the formulation of this piece of legislation, nor did it begin with the idea that we should have a poverty line that is new and modern and measures real poverty in real ways. Our work on eliminating poverty started the day we took office, the day we introduced tax cuts for middle-class Canadians, the day we introduced the Canada Child Benefit, and the day we indexed that Canada Child Benefit. All of those measures, and many, many more, $22 billion worth of investments over our first 2 years in office, all were aimed at lifting people out of poverty, and they were successful. 300,000 children have been lifted out of poverty since we took office, 650,000 Canadians, but more importantly, over 550,000 full-time jobs have also been delivered with Canadians to other Canadians to make sure that poverty doesn't enter the lives of many families. This, in total, is part of our commitment to eliminating poverty, reducing it substantially in this term of office, and moving forward with even more aggressive strategies going forward. And the investments that some wanted with the announcement of this strategy are actually also forecast and pushed forward into this year, next year, and beyond. For example, the National Housing Strategy, which is an integral part of reducing poverty in this country, is not just a $5.6 billion investment we made in our first 2 years of office. It's also the $40 billion we've now locked in with multilateral and bilateral agreements with provinces and territories over the next 10 years. In other words, it's a 15-year project in many ways to deliver affordable, safe, and secure housing for Canadians right across the country. Some of that's in new housing builds, some of that's in supports for rent supplements through the new Canada Housing Benefit, and some of that's simply in honouring the operating agreements that were set to expire and allowed to expire by the previous government. We also have a $7.5 billion investment with provinces and territories and Indigenous governments with early learning and childcare. This is another substantial investment that will make a transformative change in the lives of Canadian families, but most importantly in Canadian children, to make sure that we eliminate the poverty and the challenges that many families have accessing accessible childcare and early learning opportunities. And there are other measures which are on the horizon as well. We've announced an expert panel to show us the way to implement pharmacare. It's not something you can simply switch a switch and cut a check for. There are complications in terms of how you integrate it with provincial plans, how you integrate it with doctors' offices across the country, how you create a national formulary. All of these things are part of delivering that program, but at the end of the day, what that program is going to do is deliver more affordable health care to vulnerable Canadians right across the country, and again will be a step in the direction of eliminating poverty. You know, the reason this is so critical to us is found in the international covenants we've signed around the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. We know that the Sustainable Development Goals are focused as much on the elimination of inequity, social inequity, poverty, gender inequity, racial inequity, as they are about sustainable and prosperous development on the economic front. We need to make sure that as we build a strong country, we don't leave people behind, because the precious resource we have in this country are in fact the Canadians that contribute to the success of this program. And so the poverty reduction strategy has got to be seen as much more than simply a series of programs that support vulnerable Canadians. It's got to be seen as a major way of rethinking our economy, rethinking our social programs, rethinking our footprint in the coming century to make sure we build the most resilient generation of Canadians ever. And that is the goal of the poverty reduction strategy. That's the goal of many of our social programs when taken together as a coordinated approach to reducing poverty. And as I said, there is much more to do. We know that EI reform is critically important to the success of reducing poverty, but we also know that the work we've done on EI reform has made it easier for seasonal workers to sustain their employment in industries that stop and start based on the natural cycle of the economies in some parts of the country. We also know that making EI quicker and easier to receive for Canadians is one of the ways that we don't create a crack that people can fall between. We know that working while on benefit, extending maternity benefits, and all of the changes we've introduced to EI to make it more flexible and more accessible to Canadians and to deliver it faster to Canadians is one of the ways that, as well that we're focused on reducing poverty and reducing some of the challenges Canadians face from time to time. But at the end of the day, there's more to do. There's more to do because eliminating poverty is not simply something which you can rest on after you've made investments. You have to constantly look for those new gaps in society and those new areas where poverty starts to lock in. For example, we have an aging population. We know that seniors are aging into poverty differently than they did a generation ago, partly because of precarious work, partly because of a changing economy, which is seeing benefits and pensions reshaped even after people have paid into them for many years. So pension reform is part of our anti-poverty reduction strategy, as well as the changes we made to GIS. We knew that when we looked at poor seniors, and seniors that were living in difficult or marginalized economic circumstances, that one of the things that was driving certain pockets of seniors' poverty was gender. We knew that when women lost their partners, they sometimes lost their full pensions. We knew that women living alone didn't suddenly cut the expenses of living where they were living simply because a member of the family was no longer partnered up with them to provide to pay those bills. And so the boost we made to GIS, the Guaranteed Income Supplement, and the reform of CPP were all measures forward-looking measures that are part of our strategy to end poverty. And again, they're not announced as part of the strategy. They're part of the work we've been doing over the last 3 years, but they project positive results into the future and will help us meet the targets that are spelled out in the poverty reduction strategy. I also want to say that focusing in on building a strong middle class, focusing in on fighting climate change and providing adaptation strategies for municipalities is also part of a poverty reduction strategy. When you take a look at natural disasters which have rocked this country, whether it's the fires in Fort McMurray or the floods in New Brunswick or the challenges in Northern Ontario and Manitoba with water, when you take a look at the droughts that have hit some parts of this country, we know that as the economies are damaged in those parts of the economy, in those parts of Canada, one of the things that also happens is that low-income Canadians in those parts of Canada suffer even more. And getting those communities back on their feet means that we have economies that those people can tie their lives to and move forward with. And so making sure that climate change has less of an impact and minimize the impact of climate change over the next decade and century is just as critical to reducing poverty because it has an impact on low Canadians that's different than other Canadians. We also know in the North, we know in remote communities, that poverty is very different, that access to healthy food, to country food, is becoming more difficult in places like the Territories because as climate change moves in, animal patterns and the herding of the caribou, for example, and other situations changes, and that pushes available food further away or eliminates it altogether, unfortunately, in some circumstances, and changes their access to healthy food, and therefore has an impact in terms of the way poverty is measured in the Territories and northern communities. We know that as climate change moves forward, that some of the ice roads disappear, and therefore food security in the North is challenged by climate change as well. And additionally, I was in the Territories visiting Betchico, taking a look at some of the housing challenges up there, and the road that we came in to Betchico on was like a roller coaster. It was wavy, undulating. It was quite. I asked the member from the Northwest Territories when the road would be replaced, and he said it had just been replaced 2 years ago, but climate change had allowed the tundra to melt, and the thawing and freeze cycle was heaving the road, and in doing so, destroying a very important investment and making it almost worthless as soon as it was finished. These challenges have an impact on the economics, have the impact on the health and the welfare of Canadians in the North, and we have to turn our attention to that because building strong infrastructure in places like the connecting road between Yellowknife and Betchico is part of how you reduce poverty in those communities. Access to health care is a critical driver towards sustaining one's employment, and if you don't have access to the major centres in the North and you don't have access to the food and the distribution centres in the North, you drive poverty into those communities. And so when we take a look at the National Poverty Reduction Strategy, and when we look at how we measure it now, beyond just income and beyond just the sort of large economic numbers that previous formulas have taken a look at, access to these critical services is just important to us. And so when we look at that from that perspective, and poverty from the perspective of the investments we're making in infrastructure, we can also see that stronger transit infrastructure in major cities is also something which helps reduce poverty. If people can get to school and get to work and get home more easily, more reliably, and cheaper, with a more robust transit system across the country, we have an impact on the quality of their life, but it's an impact that actually enriches their lives by not taking as many dollars out of their pockets to pay for transit and having the government step up and do that, and at the same time making those things they need to have a quality of life that much easier to access because of a stronger transit system. All of these investments also do one other thing that's critically important as well. They deliver good paying, often unionized jobs to communities right across the country. The housing policy is the same thing. Again, investing and creating investments that not only sustain society in a critically progressive way, but also create jobs, employment, and tie in the supply chains of all the projects. And you've got a good, strong economy which is focused on doing what this poverty strategy says must be done, which is eliminate poverty right across this country from coast to coast to coast. I also want to say that we need better data, that you can't simply rely on the anecdotal evidence presented in many ways I just spoken about. You need to know whether or not racialized women are receiving health care at the same rate as in comparison to other groups of women. You need to know whether or not Indigenous children are faring as well coming out of the school system as non-Indigenous children. You need to know exactly how government support for low-income communities impacts the economies in the communities where those dollars land. When the Canada Child Benefit lands communities by the millions right across this country, you need to understand the transformational change it has in people's lives so you can figure out where gaps are and fill those gaps with new investments. For example, when we make the investment into childcare, we need to know which families are getting it and which families aren't, and why not. And if they're not getting it, we need to then take a look at our infrastructure programs to make sure that the capital programs, the operating dollars, are married to some of the other investments we make to make sure that we have good, strong, whole communities being built right across the country. Again, the poverty reduction strategy relies on data being generated through StatsCan and the long-form census, and as well disaggregated data that takes a look at the subpopulations that experience poverty differently. We need to take a look at that in concert to make sure that the investments we're making are reaching all Canadians and not just the averages that previous systems and studies and poverty lines reached. We also need to know from the data how many people we actually are lifting out of poverty and how many people we have to work harder to make sure we reach. And again, the investment in data is as critical a part of today's announcement and the bill that's in front of us as any of the measures I've spoken about from previous budgets or from future investments. Understanding what the problem is, measuring the problem is one of the best ways to start or a singularly defined reality for Canadians. We know that in Atlantic Canada, for example, as fish stocks change and as communities transform and as new technologies provide opportunities for new businesses, the kinds of poverty you find in isolated or coastal communities also changes with it. And we need to make sure that as we move forward as a country, that we start to understand those details and understand how poverty is different in region to region to region to make sure that our programs aren't one-size-fits-all designed in Ottawa solutions, but rather ideas that grow from the ground up. And one of the ways we're going to accomplish that is an advisory panel to the minister that will provide lived experience, a voice inside the ministerial offices directly here to us in Parliament to make sure that we have a regionalized and diversified set of experiences reporting out, including academics and experts, as well as activists and frontline workers, as well as our partners in municipal, provincial and Aboriginal governments. We need to make sure, in Indigenous governments, we need to make sure that we have an advisory panel which reflects the true diversity of poverty in this country so that as we evolve programs, we don't evolve them in a vacuum and we evolve them in a constant check-in, a way with a constant check-in to make sure the advice we're getting, the policy we're developing, the programs we're delivering impact all Canadians in a way that's positive. And that, too, is a critically important part of the bill that has been presented to the House here today. As I said, we also have targets, and those targets are critically important. We know, for example, that in 2015 there were 4.2 million people living in poverty in this country. We know that 1.3 million people are considered the working poor. We know that when we measured and set these targets to reduce poverty and achieve the 2030 targets set out in this bill, that we have to do it methodically, we have to do it persistently, and we have to do it in a way that doesn't leave particular groups behind. And so the targets that have been set, which are consistent with the SDGs and are consistent with our commitments to the United Nations, are aspirational targets. Can we do it faster? I hope we can. Can we reach more people quickly with stronger programs? We work every day to find out how to be more effective on that front, and we rely on some of the voices that come from across the aisle to get there, to make sure that our ideas become stronger and become more beneficial to the individuals in question. But at the end of the day, I want to leave you with one last thought, and this thought, I think, is at the heart of what we're doing. We have an opportunity in this Parliament to set a way in the next century to build the most resilient generation of children in this country's history. We need them. We need every child in this country to make a contribution to the betterment of Canada. We do that by making sure that seniors can contribute and transfer their knowledge to the young ones. We do it by making sure that those of us who are working hard right now in Parliament or in companies or in businesses or in community centres across the country are focused on making sure we stop and end child poverty as fast and as furiously as we possibly can. If we can build that resilient generation of Canadian children, if we can build the happiest, healthiest, smartest and most resilient kids in the world, Canada will succeed. But more importantly, those children will succeed. And that's why the poverty reduction strategy is a central piece of our thinking, a central piece and focus of the network of bills and laws and budgets we've passed over the last 2 years, and it's why it's the focus of our government going forward into the next century. I want all members all members to get behind this today. I want all members to get behind this, not just for today, but through the end of this parliamentary session, and to commit themselves to those ideals we just spoke about. Ending poverty in this country, focusing on building the most resilient generation of Canadian children in the history of Canada, and making sure that no one in this country is left behind as we build a stronger country by eliminating poverty and building a better future for Canada. Thank you very much. I'm free for questions.
In comments, the honourable member, question et commentaire, the honourable member for Edmonton Manning.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a wonderful speech by the honourable gentleman on the other side, and it's a beautiful bedtime story. But if we're looking at the bill, and in the annex, it's empty. There's nothing in it. It's a blank page. How did he come up with all these achievements that he's claiming that his government achieved with this bill, where the bill itself is empty?
Point of order, the honourable member for...
customary not to be using props in the House, Mr. Speaker, and I believe my friend opposite is using the paper as a prop to demonstrate his point.
The order. My understanding of the rules are that the member can refer to a bill but can't use it as a prop. So there was an improper use of the bill there. So I understand the member understands that. Yes. Okay. Very good. The honourable parliamentary secretary.
You know, I guess I could refer to the budget and ask them to read the budget, but I won't. So, but let's take a look at what the debate in this House has been.
We have a point of order. The honourable member for Elgin, Middlesex, London.
I think it's wonderful that we're being called on a point of order as a Conservative caucus, yet we just saw the Liberal parliamentary secretary do the exact same thing. So point of order using a prop.
Sorry, I missed that. I was looking over the other way. Did the honourable member have something?
Read the budget, but
Okay.
clearly they haven't.
Order. How about if we all understand for the rest of the day that we're not to pick up props and use them, because that's against the rules? Do I have unanimous consent? Okay, very good. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, thank you.
As I was saying, the debate all week, has been about the budget implementation bill, and the members opposite have said there's too much in it. One of the biggest parts of the budget implementation bill, in fact, almost 2/3 of the budget implementation bill, is our pay equity legislation. Pay equity eliminates poverty for hundreds and thousands of women across this country. And so when we take a look at the strategies we've employed, yes, I said in my speech, they're not in the poverty reduction strategy per se. They are in all of the work we've been doing since we took office. The National Housing Strategy, the Canada Child Benefit, the boost to GIS, the improvements to CPP, the pay equity legislation was just introduced. It goes on and on and on. The $7.5 billion investment in early learning and childcare. All of these investments constitute the basket of investments we've made to reduce poverty, and it's working. 300,000 kids are out of poverty, 650,000 Canadians being lifted out of poverty as a direct result, not of the index in the bill, but in the previous budgets and the previous bills introduced by this government, and I'm proud to have made those possible as a member.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Member for Nanaimo Ladysmith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We all want to see poverty eliminated in the country, and women have been at the front line of poverty, no question. When women are paid less because there's no proactive federal pay equity legislation, they're the ones that drop out of the workplace to look after kids or elders with no universal affordable childcare. They end up taking the brunt of family care and get into more precarious and part-time work. We've been calling on the government to reform EI legislation. They have not. It would have helped women in precarious work have more of a social safety net. But I can't let my colleagues' comments about pay equity go unanswered. CUPE says our members have been waiting decades for federal proactive pay equity legislation. Quote, based on this legislation, it appears that women could be waiting until 2027 for a full remedy. We urge the government to ensure that women's equality rights are no longer denied. I moved 20 amendments to the Budget Implementation Act in Finance Committee, putting down the exact amendments that the Pay Equity Coalition of Ontario, that CUPE, that the Teamsters, that Canadian Labour Congress proposed, detailed amendments under great tight timelines because the government has rammed through Budget Implementation Act and therefore the Pay Equity Bill at every step of the way. And the Liberals voted every amendment down. How do they answer that?
Parliamentary Secretary.
The approach to pay equity may differ on the other side of the House from the program that we put in place, but there's also a difference sometimes in the way in which the motions that the member spoke to are received at the government side because they don't fit into the legislative framework. It's not that they're not necessarily good ideas, they just don't match the way in which the program is going to be achieved. I know that many times the opposition wants measures legislated rather than regulated, which is an inside baseball kind of a way of explaining some of the challenges, but I would ask the member opposite to take a look at the regulations that flow from the legislation, because I think many of the things that she wants will be achieved through regulation rather than legislation. But the issue that I think that I always wonder about with the NDP, and I think that if the member opposite and I had both been members of this House in 2006, we wouldn't have defeated the government at the time when they had comprehensive pay equity legislation, comprehensive national daycare, $2 billion for housing, and the Kelowna Accord all put together. We'd have waited. I think we'd have waited to get that through before we decided to play politics with an election. And we would have made sure that we locked in those achievements were part of the last Martin government, because that would have been great for Canada over the last 10 years. Unfortunately, some parties chose politics over policy, and Canadians have been suffering for 10 years ever since.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Winnipeg North.
Yes, so thank you, Mr. Speaker. And, over the last 2-3 years, we've been talking a lot about measures that will actually have a profound positive impact on Canada as a whole. And some of those measures deal specifically with the issue of poverty. And what I'm referring to specifically is the Guaranteed Income Supplement, which was in the first budget to alleviate and literally lift thousands of seniors, the poorest seniors in the country, out of poverty. We had the enhancement of the Canada Child Benefit Program, again lifting thousands of children out of poverty. And then my colleague was just commenting in regards to the issue of pay equity. Pay equity, in part, is being dealt with within this budget implementation bill. And my question to my colleague and friend would be, would he not agree that from a political point of view, we have seen over the last few years a very progressive government on a number of very important social files?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
My remarks highlighted $22 billion worth of investments we've made since the day we've taken office that are all aimed at alleviating poverty. The member opposite, the member down the aisle suggested the CPP reform and the GIS changes to support single seniors were part of that. They are, as is the National Housing Strategy, which is not just the 10 years and $40 billion, it's also the $5.6 billion that was spent in the first 2 years of office, which is building housing now from coast to coast to coast, and in particular with the cooperative government in BC, where every housing dollar that's being spent in BC has a federal contribution. It'd be nice for the NDP across the way to recognize that instead of complain about it, but that's the reality. Our investments, the $22 billion investments, have lifted 650,000 Canadians out of poverty. 300,000 of those are children. That's progress because of real dollars being delivered to real people to build real change in this country. And I hope and pray that the next budget will do even more.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Edmonton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I noticed my colleague just recently asked about, or was commenting about all the great work the Liberals had done bringing seniors off of poverty with the increases in the GIS. And the parliamentary secretary went on and on and on about it. But I happen to notice that the departmental results just released a couple weeks ago show the opposite, that seniors living below the low-income cutoff has actually risen. And in fact, I asked the Library of Parliament to do up a report, and I've got bad eyes, so I'm not holding it as a prop, I'm just reading it, for both market basket measure, low-income cutoff 92 base, and low-income measure after tax. The amount of seniors living in poverty has increased since the government has come into power in 2015. So I have to ask, why are they focused more on rhetoric instead of helping our seniors?
Hear, hear. Parliamentary Secretary.
With an aging population, we face challenges with the seniors population. There's no question about that. As we have more seniors poverty. And that's why we have to do more than simply talk about it. We have to make investments. So the investments in affordable housing, the investments in the CPP, reducing the age of retirement from 67 to 65 will list 150,000 seniors out of potential poverty all by itself. The endless focus on nothing but the size of the debt That endless focus is ignoring the deficit that's built into people's lives in social capacity that's missing, in infrastructure that's missing, in resiliency that doesn't arrive because we're not making the proper investments. We have to measure more than just the balance sheet. We have to measure the impact our policies are having on people's lives. And when people fall into poverty, all of us have failed. And we take that responsibility seriously. And we are doubled down on making sure that our investments through pharmacare, through other programs, in particular housing, are going to alleviate that and change those numbers, because if we don't alleviate poverty in seniors, they can't make contributions to the rest of this country, and we need their contributions too.
Resuming debate, reprise du débat, the honourable member for Elgin, Middlesex, London.
And thank you very much for the opportunity to speak on this bill, Bill C-87, the opportunity for all, Canada's first poverty reduction strategy. That is the title. The 6-page document is exactly what we see. Not a lot there. This poverty reduction strategy is truly a re-announcement of 87 programs that this government either put into place, have modified, or have been around for decades. So let's not kid ourselves when we sit there and talk about a poverty reduction strategy. It's a re-announcement of things that have happened since October of 2015. That is all we're seeing here. What they have done in this bill, they've talked about the fact that they put in a metric. And I was listening to the member from Spadina, and he was talking about using this new measurement. I just want to let him know, and all Canadians that know, this measurement has been used for decades. I do applaud them for actually adopting it as the official measurement, but please do not believe that this was something that they've concocted and created. This measurement has been used by the Human Resources and Skills Development Department for years. So I just want to share that. You know, there are 4 key things that I want to focus on here today. I want to look at, and to begin, is the current poverty rates. Canadians believe, last week we had the financial update from our finance ministers. And, Canadians, when I'm reading the comments coming on Twitter and Facebook, they will support a government who runs a deficit if they believe that the money is being spent well, and it's being spent that is being in need. And that is one of the biggest things, and one of the biggest challenges I see here. We have a government that has announced an $80 billion deficit in their mandate. But if we're looking at what they've spent and what the actual statistics are showing, there are 2 absolutely different stories. And I want to start off with just what the Parliamentary Secretary said moments ago. The poverty reduction strategy started the day that we took office. So the facts that I'm going to give you today are going to be comparing data from 2014, the last year of our Harper government and Conservative government, compared to the 2016 year, the full year of when this government took place, noting that this government was working on poverty from October 19th of 2015 on. What the information shows is that the level of poverty for all persons remains at 13%. So the data between 2014 and 16, 13%, no variation in those numbers whatsoever, but an $80 billion deficit. All persons under the age of 18, we see with all of this, they talk about the Canada Child Benefit, we have seen a 0.5% decrease based on this, but we see an $80 billion deficit. Persons between the ages of 18 and 64, there have been very minor and insignificant changes. We see a change of about 1%. The one that really scares me, and will scare many of my members of the members of my caucus, especially since we really focused on seniors and the push to make sure we had a seniors minister because we thought that this government was not focusing on seniors, we were right. We have now seen an increase between 2014 and 2016 of a 2% increase for people over the age of 65 when it comes to poverty. But we also see an $80 billion deficit. What I'm trying to show here are these lines of we are spending the money on the people that need it. And I myself will sit there and say, I am the first one to want to help somebody. But these numbers are not showing any changes, but instead they're showing deficit spending, and we're not getting these results for it. So that is one of the biggest challenges that I see here. How can we support something when we're seeing no different? And that's where it comes back to this page on the metrics. As we talked about the 6-page bill, the metrics are not there. The targets are not there. The new data that we have received, we recognize that they're collecting data, and I want to share with you some information. I've had the opportunity as the Shadow Minister for Family, Children and Social Development to go across Canada, very much different but the same, and speak to these people on the ground. A couple weeks ago, I was actually in Hamilton and at the Canadian Association to End Homelessness. One of the biggest discussions there was the point-in-time count. So we want to compare the 2016 and the 2018. That is, you know something, when it came out in 2016, yes, I think it is really important to collect that data. We need to know what is leading to homelessness. We need to know how many people are there. So if we have these numbers, we actually know, have we reduced it? Has it increased? So, you know, I'm okay with that. But what we have heard from the ground are people coming out and saying, we were told to do one thing in 2016, and then point in time count, we were actually told not to go to these areas. I actually heard these from people that were doing point in time counts. They were not told not to go to those areas because poverty was flourishing, because those streets had people that were homeless, and they didn't want those people in the count. This is something that was coming down to the people that were working for the Government of Canada, telling them not to go into those areas where poverty had increased. I also have heard from the people in Kelowna. Kelowna was a really interesting trip that I had, and I sat and spoke to people at Blue Sky, and they're doing absolutely fantastic work. But they shared with me the concern that they did the point-in-time count in 2016 and 2018, and what they also did was a list, a name list, something that's a really wonderful measurement on this that we can talk more about in another discussion. But what they said was the factors that they got in 2016 and 18 through the point-in-time count endorsed by this government, it's a 24-hour window. So let's say John, who's been on that street corner for 364 days asking for assistance, let's say he happens to not be on that corner that day, his name does not count because he is not there in that 24-hour period. So what we see is we are doing these counts, we're doing them in a very micro amount of time, and when the same organizations from Kelowna are going out and doing a name count, we see that those numbers actually almost quadrupled. That they actually are saying the point-in-time count will show less than 100. But when we did our name count, where we actually go out on the streets, we're talking about 400 people. That is a huge, significant difference. So, I mean, if we're going to talk metrics, let's make sure that we're getting our metrics straight. Let's be sure that the measurements that we're using are going to be the same from one year to another year, and then we're not putting in some challenges there so that we get different results. But one thing that I also heard that was really, really important was, you keep on counting us, but we still don't have a home. So this is something that I want to bring to the attention of the Minister and the Parliamentary Secretary and the in-government, that it is lovely to collect this data, but the people that are being asked for this data, they want to start seeing results. They're being tired of doing these things and not seeing anything at the end of the day. I now want to switch the page and talk about the National Housing Strategy. We have had some private members' bills that have come through this, so we've had the opportunity to talk about housing in those areas, but let's actually talk about what the National Housing Strategy does. Over 1/3 of this announcement is not new money. It's money that we saw that was put in the 2016 and 17 budgets. So when we talk about the National Housing Strategy, we're looking at old money and we're looking at some new money. A substantial portion requires provincial money. So when they're talking about $40 billion, it's not $40 billion coming from Canadians, it's $40 billion from the Canadian government. It is something that has to have matching. And you know something, we have to make sure that those provincial governments are going to be at the table. Now, agreements have been signed, and kudos on that, but we also have to make sure that these are agreements that these provinces are not being forced to make. But the need for housing, and this is one of my biggest concerns, the need for housing is now. We have heard our NDP colleagues talk about the need for housing, and I recognize that we still see these challenges. We know that shelter use in Canada has actually increased under this government. It has not decreased, it's increased. So more people are needing shelters. And what we look at is the strategy that goes from 2016 and then up to about 2029 with this $40 billion over 10 years. What we see is it's end-loaded. The emergency is today. The emergency isn't 10 years from now. Are we saying a person who's lived on the streets for 2 years, add 12, you're going to get your money there? So we also have to look at that. So some of my biggest concerns is we're throwing money at things, but we're really not solving the problem. And right now in the Status of Women Committee, we are studying shelters. We have had some fantastic witnesses that have come in, and if we're looking at where the housing issues are, we have to look at the actual housing continuum. We have to look at the shelters. We have to look at the subsidized housing. We have to look at the affordable housing and the supportive housing. And then we also have to look at what is actually attainable for Canadians. One of the biggest challenges that we're seeing, and this is something that this government has not addressed, we see that people are being kept in shelters because there is not room to move out of that continuum. Now, just a little news alert, every day somebody is looking for a shelter across Canada. There's always people looking for help, whether it's women that are leaving abused relationships or people who just cannot financially support themselves in their housing. They're looking for places. But the continuum of housing is broken, and this government continues to allow it to be broken and continues to expand the problem. So when somebody goes to look for an affordable housing, I can tell you of a young woman that's moved into a place in June, into a second-stage housing. She is stuck in second-stage housing because there is no housing available for her to go to. The housing markets are not there. So when we look at the National Housing Strategy, we can talk about affordable, but what is the plan to actually get affordable housing built? What is the plan to break down and make sure that we're working with all of our communities, from the developers and the landowners to the people who are actually out there with the hammers? We have seen huge gaps, and this government is not addressing it. I want to give you a few quotes because I think the thing is we talk about these all the time, but there's a few quotes I wanted to share with you because reality check is here. From CBC News posted on June 13th of 2018, quote, between 2014 and 2017, chronic homelessness in the city climbed by 21%, while the use of emergency shelters rose by 16%. So under this government, in the city of Ottawa, we have seen an increase of 21% of chronic homelessness increased. So how is this government talking about that? Same quote or same source and a second quote. This report titled Homelessness in Ottawa, A Roadmap for Change, examines how the city's 10-year plan is faring and offers suggestions on how to turn the tide. While the report contains some good news, 577 people were able to move into their own homes since 2015, thanks to the city's use of Housing First model. Deans acknowledges Ottawa is not trending in the right direction. So we're talking about a document that was just put out that's looking at housing from 2014 to 2017, and the people from Ottawa are saying we are not going in the right direction, and this is under this government. I want to share with you a few quotes also talking about Housing First, because I think, we really, when we speak to this government, they'll talk about Housing First, and let's be honest, the reason they don't like it is because the Conservatives put it in. It's that simple. We see many of our pieces of legislation that were done between 2006 and 15 that have been repealed only because it was Conservative policy. Exactly. So I want to read to you a few items, and these are really important and critical points. From the Mental Health Commission's final report, over the 2-year period after participants entered the study, every $10 invested in Housing First services resulted in an average savings of $9.60 for high needs. Significant cost savings were realized for the 10% of participants who had the highest cost at study entry. For this group, the intervention cost was $19,582 per person per year on an average. Over the 2-year period following study entry, every $10 invested in Housing First services resulted in an average savings of $21.72. From the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness, this is Tim Richter who is speaking on this. People across Canada will know who, if they're working in housing, they'll understand who he is, and I recognize that the Parliamentary Secretary knows who he is as well. He has indicated, we won't prevent and reduce chronic homelessness in Canada without Housing First, and that removing the Housing First investment target could be risky because communities may drift away from the Housing First investments, harming efforts to reduce homelessness. And finally, the last quote on this one from the Institute of Fiscal Studies and Democracy. Quote, strongly objects to the government policy decision to remove the Housing First investment target and says that Reaching Home leaves open the door for federal funding to be diverted towards homelessness intervention that are neither evidence-based or practice-based. So I just wanted to bring up that information because we can sit there and talk about what a great deal they're doing in the National Housing Strategy and applaud and all of these kind of things, but we have people on the ground who actually face homelessness every day, face clients every day, and this is the reports that we're getting back. So I said that was my final quote on that, but it is not. Because it was interesting last night, we were on a panel on CTV, and we're talking about the emergent crisis that we have with immigration and the cost. And the PBO came out indicating that over the 2-year period from July of 2017 till March of 2019, if this government stays on track, that they are going to spend $1.1 billion. And so I think we really need to concentrate on the fact that we have a government that has no true policies for the people that come into this country and do not have a plan on how we're actually going to assist these new immigrants into Canada. And so from a quote from Toronto, Toronto has seen a spike in refugee claimants in shelters this year, with an average nightly numbers climbing to 3,191 this month, more than 6 times the level of 2 years ago. Toronto Mayor John Tory has issued increasingly urgent calls for additional funding from federal and provincial government. He says 41% of those in the city's already strained shelter system are now refugee claimants. By November, this share is projected to be hit 54%. As a result, for the first time, the city is temporarily housing people in student residences at 2 community colleges, spaces that are filling up fast. So the reason I'm bringing this up is, of course, yesterday with the PBO report, we recognize that the cost of new immigrants into this country is basically on average of what a minimum wage worker will make over a course of 1 year. And that is what our government is spending because they do not have a plan. And I wish they would start listening to what Canadians are actually saying. Now, I want to, for a few minutes, actually turn it to a positive note. The Social Finance Fund was something that was put in the mini budget last week. Although it was supposed to be an economic review, there was a heck of a lot of spending that we saw there. And the Social Finance Fund in the fall economic statement proposes to make available $755 million on a cash basis over the next 10 years to establish a social finance fund with an additional $50 million over 2 years in an investment and readiness stream. You know, I look at these things because this is something our government actually started studying in 2011, in 2013, and in 2015 it was in our federal budget. So this is something that Conservatives do believe in. But part of the problem that I have here is, first, where is the Liberal government going to find this money? We are already talking about an $80 billion deficit, and now we're talking about what we're going to do next. So that is one of my concerns. We also have to remind ourselves that 10-year program, let's see when that money is being spent. If we're talking about social programs being financed through this social finance fund to help urgency that includes homelessness, this money is once again backloaded and does not appear for the first 2 years in this mandate. So I think that's really important. This is money that is spent after the 2019 election. Like everything else this government proposes, it is spent after the election so that they can have their platform for their 4-year mandate. So these are really huge concerns for me as well. The child benefits is something that they will constantly talk about, and this is what we hear about, the Canada Child Benefit. It's lifted 300,000 children out of poverty. And you know, anything that we can do to help our children, we will always support. But we also have to make sure that what they're doing is on the right track. And part of my concern is, if they're saying they're doing all of these things, and we see less than 0.5% in decrease in child poverty, we've got a problem. I really want to just sum this up today, that this current government is truly on a poor track. They have a poor track record, and program performance is just horrendous. We support measures that support to reduce poverty and provide a fulsome approach. We oppose the carbon tax because we know the carbon tax is actually going to be one thing that is in addition to these low-income people that they have to spend money on. And this is because this government is coming out with one of their policies, and it's not a climate change policy, it is it is a social engineering policy. There is nothing there that says this is what's going to happen, because I'm going to tell you that the train that does not go from my house to my workplace, I won't be able to take. It doesn't exist. Like any other consumer, I will be in my automobile, like many Canadians that do not have public transit. We will be in our automobiles, we will be gassing up, and we will be paying 11 cents more a litre because of this government. And I applaud the provincial government of Ontario for banning this ridiculous carbon tax. But I want to sum it up with my final saying. We have a program, we have something that's come out with 87 different programs. In the last few months, we have seen GM this week, 2,800 jobs. We have some Bombardier, 5,000 jobs. And we cannot forget about the people in Alberta. 110,000 jobs in Alberta have been lost because of this Prime Minister and because of Bill C-69 and because of these ridiculous policies that they look at what they want, but they don't look at what Canadians want and what Canadians need, and they need jobs. And I'm asking, out of this entire poverty reduction strategy, how come we're not talking about how we can stay competitive in Canada, how we can retain jobs here in Canada, and how we can create jobs here in Canada? We don't see that in the 87. We know poverty has many, many ways of looking at that, and there's many different pillars. One of the pillars is actually strong fiscal economy with job creation. we do not see job creation. And you can say over there that you get it, but we do not. If we see job creation, we wouldn't have 110,000 people in Alberta losing their jobs. If this government was worried about poverty reduction, they would be putting in initiatives that keep people working in Canada and not putting in them to the employment insurance. Employment insurance is not the option that Canadian workers are looking for. They're looking to go to work every day. They're looking at putting bread and butter on their tables for their families. Their job is to go out there and get a job as a family member, to be able to do this for their families. So I say, Bill C-87, it's gutless. It's worse than what Seinfeld would say. It's filled with nothing. And if you're really talking about helping people with poverty, where is the guts?
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Spadina, Fort York.
One of the good things about elections is they bring new voices to Parliament, and it's nice to see the Conservatives finally talking about housing, about the importance of data, about the importance of investments in transforming the lives of low-income Canadians right across the country. Because I can tell you for the last 10 years, while I was in Parliament in the last session, that was not something the Conservatives were focused in on. On the issue of housing, of course you back-end load housing programs. When you had 1,000 units in one constituency one year, and 1,000 the next year, and 1,000 the year after that, you go from having to support 1,000 houses to 2,000 to 3,000. And if your dollars don't grow with the program, you don't provide the rent support, you don't provide the repair dollars, and you don't grow a stronger, larger system to house more Canadians. That's why it's back-end loaded. That's the way every housing expert in the universe, let alone Canada, has supported it. But I want to ask the member opposite about Housing First, which she was so proud of. Housing First has a deliberate design flaw in it that required you to live on the street for 6 months before you got rent. So if you were a senior who lost income because of a death in the family, perhaps, you had to live on the street before you could get a rent check from the Conservative government. And the same was true for youth aging out of care in the foster system. We were telling the most vulnerable children in this country, you had to live on the street for 6 months before we'd even think about talking to you about support. Can the member opposite really say that those two policies in particular are the hallmark of their social achievement and what they constitute as good housing policy? Because I can tell you something, it literally killed people.
The honourable member for Elgin, Middlesex, London.
You know, I recognize the work that this parliamentary secretary has done that. And you know, it's great. When we have discussions, though, there can't always be a right and wrong answer. I am saying to this policy, we have experts who are on the ground who are saying we should not deviate from this program. Are there flaws? There are some flaws. But he is making it out to be the worst program ever and how it didn't work so well. I really question that. And when we talk about housing, if we never talked about housing, the homelessness partnering strategy would not have been supported. The Housing First project or stuff would never have been there. Right. These are policies that this government put forward. These are the policies that we worked on. So he can talk about us being absent for housing. We were there. We're just not sitting there flying and applauding about things that we have actually not done.
We'll have time for one more question before we go to question period and then resume after. Questions et commentaires, l'honorable
The honourable member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 1 in 6 Canadians lives in poverty. That's 5.8 million. When I consulted in my riding, when I had put forward a private member's business bill on poverty, I heard from various groups, you have to reduce in reducing in poverty. It costs more not to invest in poverty reduction. We have to help people get back into the job market. We need universal pharmacare, which will help Canadians to save billions of dollars, both employees and employers. Can my colleague tell me what in this legislation would help people economically? Because these are savings which will be extraordinarily meaningful. How can we invest? Should we invest to reduce poverty? Does my colleague agree?
Important to do smart investments. And I really, once again, applaud the member from the NDP. She has done fantastic work and shows all of her compassion. But is it important to invest? If this government is investing, though, let me just give you a snapshot on how they invest. Last week, it was reported that $500,000 was used to create a logo and branding for poverty reduction. Is that the way we're going to spend our money? It's definitely the way that this Liberal government spends their money, but is that what's best for Canadians? Is a $500,000 bill the proper way of doing it? So smart investments, and that's something that this government cannot do.
We'll pause now for question period. The honourable member will have 5 minutes and 45 seconds coming to her when she returns, or when we return to the debate. Statements by members. Déclaration de député. The honourable member for Bay of Quinte.
Mr. Speaker, today I pay tribute to a constituent of mine, Harry Leslie Smith. Harry was an acclaimed writer who fused his first-hand experience of growing up in England during the Depression and serving in the Royal Air Force during the Second World War, with the direct call to build up democracy and advance human rights across our world. It was an honor to know Harry. He had a tireless spirit and always spoke up for the marginalized, styling himself as the world's oldest rebel. His focus was inspired by many challenges confronted in his earliest years. Harry's ability to connect with others across generations, cultural backgrounds, and personal stories inspired us all to listen and learn about the past, but especially to participate in building our own futures. The scale of tributes pouring in for Harry shows the real impact of his legacy, which will be carried on by his son, John. I stand with Harry. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable député de Lévis-Lotbinière.
The honourable member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, the leaders of our country, and history will remember this, are those who unite Canadians around issues of our century to build a better country, recognizing First Nations and the two founding nations, Francophones and Anglophones, as an open society that is welcoming. That goes without saying. The future of our country requires national unity by working together with all nations who cohabit all across this country, with a view to prospering individually and collectively. It serves no purpose to pit one against another and revive an old, pointless debate. Mr. Speaker, let's be proud of what we can bring to our country in a constructive fashion for the future generations. Thank you very much.
Member for Eglinton Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, on Jewish Refugee Day, I wish to commemorate the nearly 1 million Jewish refugees who were forced to flee Iran and other Arab countries due to religious persecution. These Jewish families were devastated as they were forced into exile, and they were also forced to experience injustices, the most egregious human rights violations, systemic violence, and even genocide. Fortunately, some were able to flee to Israel, Europe, South America, and even here in Canada, where their vibrant communities today exemplify their strength and resilience. While the community continues to thrive, we remember these refugees and their lived experiences, as many incur similar injustices today and around the world. On this day, let us reflect and recognize the persecution and the sacrifices of these Jewish refugees, which they had to endure, and let us also celebrate their accomplishments, their resilience, and all of which is such a testament to the strength of this community. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well said.
The honourable member for Laurier St. Marie. Mr. Speaker, December 1st is World AIDS Day. It's an opportunity to remember the far too many lives affected by HIV and AIDS, and to thank all stakeholders and community groups working with people who are living with HIV, as well as doing outreach and educating the public.
Across Canada, and we saw an 11% increase in the number of reported cases.
So we're very concerned that there are still too many community organizations in Canada at risk of closing their doors due to a lack of funding. Many report that there's been an erosion in services provided to people living with HIV and their families. If we want to put an end to the stigma affecting people with HIV or AIDS and prevent a spread of the virus, we need to continue investing in various approaches.
All have to work together.
The honourable member for Vaudreuil-Soulanges. Mr. Speaker, Today, I have the honor to rise in the House to highlight the extraordinary work of two community-based organizations in Vaudreuil-Soulanges, the Centre d'Action Bénévole L'Actuel and the Saint-Lazare Circle of Friends. In addition to supporting other local organizations, the Centre d'Action Bénévole Actuel, in its 30th year now, provides immediate support to people living on their own, isolated, or losing their independence. The dedication of these volunteers enables the most vulnerable members of our community to enjoy the holiday season every year.
Maggie, the Circle of Friends started in the St. Lazare Hudson area and now has over 700 members from across our whole community. In times of crisis, they support our families by pooling their resources to provide needed meals, transportation, childcare, and pet care to families who are in crisis. Mr. Speaker, thanks to the dedication of these volunteers, our community is stronger. And I would like to give my warmest thanks to the women and men in our community who put the needs and well-being of others above their own every single day. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Barrie Innisfil.
Mr. Speaker, I stand in this House today to pay tribute to the late Willard Kinsey. Willard Kinsey was the first mayor of the city of Barrie following its incorporation in 1959. Residents of Barrie have an incredible waterfront today. It's because of Mayor Kinsey's vision, leadership, and love of the city that generations of Barrie residents get to enjoy our waterfront along Kempenfelt Bay. When I was first elected to council in 2006, like so many of my colleagues, I relied on Mayor Kinsey's wisdom and knowledge to serve my constituents, and he taught me so much about our history and public service. Mayor Kinsey was active in Barrie until his passing, always there to provide guidance and mentorship to City Council. Mr. Kinsey served as mayor from 1957 to 1961, but because of the rules of the day, he could only serve one term. One can only imagine what he could have done if given more than those 4 years. Fortunately, he continued to give decades of his life to the city and the people he loved. We will miss him dearly. We thank Mayor Kinsey for his bold vision and for not listening to the naysayers. We also thank his family for sharing Willard with us so that we could learn so much and be inspired by him. May God bless Willard Kinsey and use him to create an even better heaven.
L'honorable député.
The honourable member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, a very special event took place in my riding on November 25th. For the 20th year in a row, the Canadian Pacific Holiday Train traveled across my riding, making stops at places like Kanawaki, Saint-Constant, Delson, and Saint-Mathieu. At each whistle stop, people along the track were treated to Christmas classics by singer Jojo Mazon and Sam Roberts Band. According to organizers, over 10,000 came out to see the holiday train. That pretty much sums up how successful the event was. The train is unique in that it raises funds for various regional food drives. This year alone, CP raised $20,000 for these organizations. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to invite my constituents to give generously to the various food drives in the riding this Sunday. Many families will benefit from Christmas baskets and have a better holiday season. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Valley North.
Mr. Speaker, when we improve the health and the well-being of our children, they can do better in school. It is estimated that 1 in 5 Canadian children is at the risk of starting school on an empty stomach. And this is why school nutrition programs have become so popular. Earlier this month, I joined the Toronto Foundation for Student Success as it teamed up with schools such as Muirhead Public School in my riding to prepare and deliver healthy breakfast to students. And I watched each student smile happily. I commend the dedication of the Toronto Foundation for Student Success, participating schools, and the devoted parent volunteers who help prepare and serve these nutritious meals so that all students start their day ready to learn. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Elgin, Middlesex, London.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today marks the end of Adoption Awareness Month. Throughout this month, we take special notice of adopted families and community partners across Canada and celebrate the joys and challenges that exist with families formed by adoption. For me, adoption is a topic that is close to home. My husband, Mike, was adopted at birth. Last week, I had the opportunity to meet with Adopt for Life, Ontario's Adoptive Parents Association, who were in Ottawa along with the Adoption Council of Canada and faculty and students from the University of Western Ontario to raise awareness about how Canada can better support families formed by adoption and how adoption has changed over the years. We spoke about the importance of attachment between children and their parents and families formed by adoption. Attachment is a crucial aspect of human development. This is often disrupted from kids in child welfare. I encourage MPs to support policies that help adoptive parents to strengthen these bonds and enable their children to thrive. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to point out a special recognition that was received by an organization in my riding. The Bike Across Lac-Saint-Jean was honoured again this year when it won the Outdoor Adventure Tourism Award at the Canadian Tourism Awards. It was just one of 3 finalists from coast to coast. This bike ride is a relative newcomer to the sports and tourism industry in our region, but it has really made a place for itself. This award shows how important this event is to Lac-Saint-Jean. I'd like to offer my most sincere congratulations to all involved, particularly David Lecointre and Michel de Champlain, the director and president of the organization. You're the pride of the region. The 2019 version will take place from February 14th to 16th from Roberval to Père-Banca. Once again, my sincerest congratulations. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, Best Buddies is an international program that has operated for 50 years and now has 2,500 chapters worldwide. Today I rise to speak about one of them. Niagara's chapter of Best Buddies program partners with students at Brock University and provides opportunities for members like Stephanie Smith to participate in monthly outings and activities, including trips to the local hockey arena to cheer on our Ice Dogs, trips to Heartland Forest to learn about our natural environment, and even an annual trip to Toronto to attend a theatrical production. Stephanie met with me earlier this year to highlight how much Best Buddies means to her, her friends, and many students at Brock University. The Brock chapter of Best Buddies was established in 2008. The program pairs adults who have intellectual disabilities with students at Brock University to help build friendships, expand networks, and participate in monthly activities. In Niagara, the chapter of Best Buddies is coordinated by Community Living St. Catharines, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank them for helping to make this great program possible. Thank you so much.
The honourable member for Flamborough-Glenbrook.
Mr. Speaker, this year has been a particularly difficult one for the global Jewish community. The attack on the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh last month, as well as too many other anti-Semitic events even here in Canada, are a painful reminder that the fight against anti-Semitism endures. Today, on Jewish Refugee Day, we commemorate the 850,000 Jews across the Middle East who were displaced from their homes in Arab countries and Iran as a result of racism and religious persecution during the 1940s to the 1970s. Mr. Speaker, as part of the annual commemoration, B'nai B'rith is doing truly outstanding work in honoring and educating people on the horrors that Jewish families and individuals have faced, while also promoting awareness of many other great injustices. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of my parliamentary colleagues, I want to assure the Canadian Jewish community that we remember the Jewish refugees forced from their homes on this day of commemoration, and that we will always fight against anti-Semitism and racism in all of its forms, here at home and around the world.
The honourable member for Sackville, Preston, Chesapeake. Tomorrow, Saturday, December 1st, the Franco-Ontarian Resistance Movement will be holding a demonstration all across Ontario to protest against the cuts by the Doug Ford Conservative government in services to Francophones. These cuts are an unacceptable backward step in terms of the hard-won rights and services of the Francophone community in Ontario. Once again, the Conservatives are showing their lack of understanding and respect towards the 600,000 Franco-Ontarians and millions of Francophones all across the country. As a proud Acadian and president of the Official Languages Minority Communities Caucus, I wish to state my support for Franco-Ontarians. It's essential for the Ford government to reverse its decision to scrap the Commissioner of French Language Services and the French University. To our Franco-Ontarian brothers, know that Acadia is with you. The honourable member for Drummond. Mr. Speaker, I rise in the House today to defend Franco-Ontarians who are fighting day by day to protect their language rights and keep French alive. The ideological decision of the Ford government in Ontario to scrap the Commissioner of French Services and the French University threaten the development of the Franco-Ontarian community. The entire Francophone minority of Canada is concerned by this unfounded decision, unfair decision by the Ford government. History has shown that Franco-Ontarians have been brave and have never given up in the fight to preserve their hard-won rights. No one is indifferent to the fate of Franco-Ontarians. Francophone communities all across the country are mobilizing to defend their rights. The government must now prove that Francophone communities are important. They need to walk the talk. I would encourage as many people as possible to show up for these demonstrations.
Ocean Trail, Eagle Creek.
Yesterday, Saskatchewan gained another ally in its court challenge against the Liberals' carbon tax when New Brunswick's Attorney General gave notice that the province will intervene on Saskatchewan's side. Canadians know that the Liberal carbon tax is nothing more than a cash grab designed to make up for their reckless spending. We understand that this is a global issue and that unless countries like China reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, global emissions will continue to increase. The Liberals' carbon tax gives exemptions to big businesses, while their anti-resource legislation hurts the middle class and cripples Canada's economy, all the while doing nothing for the environment. Their carbon tax is not an environmental plan, it is a revenue plan. Residents of Saskatchewan welcome New Brunswick's support in our fight to make life more affordable for middle-class Canadians and those working hard to join it.
Now, a member for Argenteuil-La Petite Nation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This year, the Invictus Games will be held from October 20th to 27th in Australia. This is the only international event, sporting event, for active military personnel and veterans. It's a unique opportunity to celebrate these men and women who have made incredible sacrifices for their country.
I've been filled with some incredible moments of strength, courage, and compassion. I am very proud of our 39 athletes who competed this year against 17 countries around the world. This game shows us the power of sport. These men and women found the motivation to move on and not to be defined by their injuries.
Our government knows how important it is to support veterans and their families, and that is why we reopened Veterans Affairs offices, because, in our view, access to services for our veterans is essential.
Oral questions, question orale, the Honourable Opposition House Leader.
There's a troubling media report last night claiming that the Liberal member from Brampton East and the Minister of Innovation were both given confidential information about a real estate transaction in Brampton. The report says that the results of the investigation into this deal have been referred to the RCMP. Wow. My question is for the Minister of Innovation, Science and Economic Development. Is this media report true? Did the minister receive confidential information about a real estate transaction in Brampton?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, any insinuation of wrongdoing by the Minister of Innovation is absolutely false, and repeating it outside this chamber will be met with a strong response from the minister's lawyer. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Opposition House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, there is still so much that we don't know involving the saga around the Liberal member from Brampton East. But what we do know about this saga involves a police investigation touching on drugs, money laundering, international terrorism, and $1 million gambling debt.
Really?
The Prime Minister and these Liberals need to come clean and tell us what else they are hiding about this growing scandal.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, as I have repeated several times, it was last week that the member informed us that he was addressing certain challenges and that he is receiving treatment from a health professional. We do believe that he receives the support that he needs. The member very well knows that when it comes to the RCMP, they work independently of government, and that is the proper way for them to function. I would hope she would agree. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Opposition House Leader.
Well, the House Leader needs to get her story straight, because up until now, both the Prime Minister's office, the House Leader, and the Whip have been saying that they learned of these problems on November 22nd. But we've just learned that the Prime Minister's office is now saying they were told about an RCMP investigation on November 17th. So what is it? The deception and cover-up just keep getting worse. Canadians deserve some honest and clear answers. So let's start with something very simple. On what date did the Prime Minister and his office become aware of this RCMP investigation?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the member, once again, should very well know, as all members should know, that the RCMP works independently of government. The government does not direct investigations. When it comes to this member in question, it was last week that he informed the office that he was undergoing certain challenges. We hope he receives the treatment and support that he needs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
L'Honourable Député de Lévis.
The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, the RCMP investigation into the Brampton East Member of Government puts the Liberal government in hot water. The question is no longer if yes or no he will resign, but rather why the Liberal Party did not show him the door. Mr. Speaker, my question is simple. What is hiding behind this shady affair, and why is the Prime Minister defending the member for Brampton East? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, it is last week that the member told us he was facing certain challenges and that he was going to seek the help of a health professional, and we hope that he will receive the support he needs. The member knows full well that the RCMP works independently from the government. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, why is the Prime Minister defending the indefensible while connections to organized crime loom on the horizon? This is a scandal. Mr. Speaker, the integrity and the reputation of the government is at stake once again. Canadians are concerned and deserve an answer. Has our national security been jeopardized by the actions of the Liberal member for Brampton East? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, the member must know full well that the RCMP works independently from the government, and we respect that independence. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Hochelaga.
The Prime Minister used his best negotiating tactics to force Donald Trump to abolish tariffs on steel and aluminum. He was going to deprive the cameras of his presence at the signing of the USMCA. Great negotiating tactics. But after all that, the Prime Minister went ahead and signed the agreement without getting rid of the tariffs on steel and aluminum. The deal should not have been signed with these tariffs still in place. Why are the Liberals going ahead and betraying our steel and aluminum workers?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, we are very focused on eliminating the unjustified and illegal tariffs imposed by the U.S. on Canadian steel and aluminum. This is a top priority for our government. We've put in place strong, responsive measures to defend our workers that have been well received by Canadians. We have also signed the Auto Section 232 side letter, which gives Canada important protections against the threat of U.S. automotive tariffs that would have hurt our economy and thousands of good-paying jobs on both sides of the border. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well done. Very good. L'Honourable Député de Hochelaga.
The Honourable Member for Hochelaga. Mr. Speaker, thousands of jobs in the steel and aluminum sector are at risk, and that's not all. There's also a clause that gives the United States oversight over the Canadian dairy sector. On top of having opened up a breach in supply management for the third time in 3 years, the Prime Minister has just signed a document that gives the Americans control over our system and that endangers our sovereignty. Why is it that the Liberals always use our agricultural producers as a bargaining chip? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Agriculture. Mr. Speaker, the NDP is saying things in this House But behind closed doors, they admit that this is an agreement that is protecting thousands of Canadian jobs. The leader of the NDP celebrated the event during an event on Tuesday, 30th of October in Ottawa. And the member for Rosemont-la-Patrie, who is also the Quebec lieutenant for the NDP, called the agreement as the best possible agreement. Thank you. The honourable member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. Mr. Speaker, it's a bad agreement for producers and for steel and aluminum workers, and we'll continue to say that. Mr. Speaker, do you remember when the Prime Minister was elected and he said things would be done differently, that they would avoid conflicts of interest and even any appearance of a conflict of interest? But after investigations into the Prime Minister himself, the Minister of Finance, and while the Commissioner is assessing the case of the member for Léonard Saint-Michel, now it's the turn of the Liberal member for Brampton East to be the subject of an investigation, where still the RCMP is also on his case. What's happening within the Liberal Party? Does anything go? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, the member has said many things, and he can say what he will, but he must know full well that the RCMP works independently from the government, and we on this side of the House respect their work. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. Well, it doesn't look like things are being taken too seriously on their side. You know, this is no small matter. While the member for Brampton East was sitting on the Finance Committee, he asked some pretty troubling questions. For example, he said, how many resources does FinTrack have to go after each little $10,000 transaction? If I'm money laundering, I'm not doing transactions in the millions to catch attention. I'm doing them at the 10,000 limit to get away with it. 10 or 15,000, end of quote. If those questions attracted the attention of the RCMP, why didn't they not attract the attention of the Prime Minister? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, we take all these things very seriously, and I'm going to repeat once again that the work of the RCMP is done independently from the government. Now, I can see that the member is very interested in this, but we on this side of the House allow the RCMP to work independently, and we will respect them and let them continue to do their work.
London.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberals said the Prime Minister wouldn't attend a new NAFTA signing ceremony with Donald Trump if the steel and aluminum tariffs were still in place. Workers in our steel and aluminum sectors have been greatly affected by these tariffs, and yet we saw the Prime Minister with Donald Trump this morning signing this deal. Can the Liberals confirm that the tariffs have been removed?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Canada has always been clear that the Section 232 tariffs and the new trade deal negotiations are entirely different issues. Section 232, after all, is actually a national security consideration, and it is absurd to suggest that Canada could pose any kind of security threat to the United States. It is overwhelmingly in the best interests of both Canada and the United States that these reciprocal tariffs be lifted. In the meantime, our strong responsive measures to defend our workers will remain firmly in place. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Barrie Innisfil.
A couple of weeks ago, the Liberals said that the Prime Minister would not grace Donald Trump with his presence at the signing ceremony of the new NAFTA deal if the steel and aluminum tariffs were removed. Well, this morning, we saw the Prime Minister standing side by side with Donald Trump at that very ceremony. So much for claiming to have the backs of steel and aluminum workers. Why did the Prime Minister capitulate to Donald Trump and give him the signing ceremony he said he wouldn't?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister
Mr.
of
Speaker,
Foreign
I'm rather
Affairs.
surprised to hear the response from the opposition this week, criticizing Canada's retaliatory measures in response to the illegal and unjustified Section 232 tariffs. Last Monday, they called our response dumb, and yet it's been well received by Canadians, and it was supported by the Conservatives at the time. Firstly, the Conservatives are asking us to capitulate on NAFTA. Secondly, they're asking us to abandon our retaliatory measures. It's a darn good thing that they are not at the negotiating table.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Well, I hope the Minister will repeat that to the workers in the steel and aluminum sector that is still suffering. Because on the 7th of November last, on behalf of the Government of Canada, our ambassador to the United States said that Canada would not sign as long as those tariffs were not lifted. This morning, the government signed. Why is the government doing one thing, saying one thing and doing another? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Industry stands behind our measured, perfectly reciprocal, dollar-for-dollar response to these illegal and unjustified tariffs. I would like to remind my honourable colleague that the Canadian Steel Producers Association has said, quote, Canada's retaliatory tariffs are vital in protecting the jobs of 23,000 steelworkers, stabilizing our domestic market, and creating the opportunity for Canada's steel producers to enhance supply chains. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, the question is very simple. As long as that free trade agreement hadn't been signed, it was still possible that pressure could be put on the American government so that they withdraw those tariffs on steel, aluminum, and softwood. 80,000 people in Quebec are directly affected by this. But this morning, with that beautiful photo of all the heads of state, the Prime Minister signed. So he was supposed to remove those tariffs, have those tariffs removed before signing. Why did he not?
As we have always said, Section 232 tariffs and new trade deal negotiations are entirely different issues. Our position remains clear and firm. These tariffs are entirely illegal and unjustified.
Hear, hear.
The new NAFTA agreement is further proof that our government puts Canadians and workers at the forefront of every single one of our decisions and actions. Just as we fought for Canadians at the NAFTA negotiating table, we will continue to fight against these tariffs for our steel and aluminum workers.
The Honourable Member for Carleton.
Well, actually, they put Donald Trump at the forefront of their agenda on trade, capitulating to him. But back here at home, Canadians are suffering under carbon taxes. In Calgary, the school board just reported it had to spend $3.3 million on carbon taxes and had to cancel 5 school buses, affecting 400 school children because the carbon tax was too expensive to keep them in operation. Ironically, school buses are good for the environment because they put everybody on the same vehicle instead of more cars on the road. How many Ontario school buses will have to be cancelled when the Liberals impose their new carbon tax on January 4th?
The Honourable Minister of the Environment.
Mr. Speaker, it's really unfortunate that there's a new generation of Conservatives that don't seem to understand that climate change is real, that's having a real impact. In fact, when you look, there's some like the member for Caribou, Prince George, he doesn't even seem to think that climate change is real. We know that we need to take action. We know that we need to do the measures that make most sense, that when you look at putting a price on pollution, you have the President and CEO of the Business Council of Canada. We support the price mechanism because it provides the economic incentive for consumers to change their behavior and for businesses to invest in technologies that progressively reduce their emissions over time. But what Canadians want to know is what exactly is the Conservative...
The Honourable Member for Carleton.
What's our plan? Well, our plan certainly is not to hammer school children, consumers, and families with higher taxes and then use quotes from the lobbyists for CEOs to defend it all. In fact, those same CEOs have gotten themselves exemptions from the carbon tax while making everyday Canadians pay. Now, the government's own documents admit that the carbon tax will have to be 6 times higher than the government admits right now. That means a 66-cent a litre tax on gas. Will the minister confirm that the tax is going to go up to 66 cents a litre if this party is re-elected?
Honourable Minister of the Environment.
Speaker, I'm quite happy to present the document that explains exactly how pricing pollution will work. That in provinces that haven't stepped up, who want to make it free to pollute, we have said that we will take all the revenues from the price on pollution, give it back to Ontarians, give it back to Manitobans, give it back to Saskatchewans, because we know we need to do right by the environment, and we can also make life affordable. But once again, what Canadians want to know is what...
The Honourable Member for Carleton asked a very good question. I'm trying to hear the answer, and I'm having a hard time, so I would ask the members to quit shouting across. I'll let the Honourable Minister for the Environment finish her answer.
But, Mr. Speaker, maybe I could just talk about what doctors from around the world are saying, that they're saying a price on pollution is the best treatment for a major public health crisis afflicting the country. Climate change. Mark Carney, Governor of the Bank of England, you need a price on carbon and a price on pollution. Canada, as of today, has both. Not only does it tackle climate change, it also unlocks the $30 trillion economic opportunity of clean growth. You can grow the economy, you can tackle the climate change.
L'honorable député de Laurier-Sainte.
The honourable member for Laurier-Sainte-Marie.
According to news reports, many experts say there is definite proof that Canadian weapons have been used in the Saudi-led war in Yemen. They say photos and videos clearly show Canadian armored vehicles and rifles on the scene, and that Canadian companies train pilots taking part in hostilities. Mr. Speaker, we are talking about potential complicity in war crimes. Will the government wake up and launch an immediate independent investigation?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Canada calls for an immediate ceasefire in Yemen. We deplore the humanitarian disaster and demand immediate access for life-saving food and aid. Canada has led a resolution at the UN to renew the mandated experts to examine human rights violations in Yemen. We require and expect that Canadian arms exports are used in a way that fully respects human rights, and if there is evidence that Canadian arms are being misused or have been diverted, we will suspend those export permits, as we have done in the past. Thank you.
L'honorable député de Laurier.
The honourable member for Laurier-Sainte-Marie.
And then we provide arms to the country that prevent that humanitarian assistance to reach those who need it.
Mr. Speaker, for 3 years now, we have been calling on the government to stop exporting weapons to Saudi Arabia. Political prisoners, torture, oppression of women, forced disappearances, not to mention the horrible war in Yemen, which has led to famine, destruction, and war crimes in this devastated country. What is the government waiting for? When will it finally stop these weapons transfers to Saudi Arabia? The Honourable
Speaker, our government condemns the horrible murder of Jamal Khashoggi and are deeply concerned by reports of the participation of Saudi officials. We strongly demand and expect that Canadians' arms exports are used in a way that fully respects human rights. As the Prime Minister said, we are actively reviewing existing export permits to Saudi Arabia, and of course, during this review, no permits are being issued.
Good job. The honourable member for Haldimand, Norfolk.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Liberals are going to have to pay $23 billion next year just for the interest on the country's debt. And they're going to have to borrow $20 billion to pay for it. That's like using one credit card to pay off another. And every sensible Canadian knows that that's a recipe for financial disaster. To fix the problem, the Liberals need to keep their promise to Canadians to balance the budget. So, Mr. Speaker, when will they?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
In 2015, after disastrous policies on the part of the Conservative government, and the country was headed to a recession, there had been the worst job creation record, the worst unemployment level. And we took a different approach, an approach that has been applauded internationally. We've invested in infrastructure, in Canadians, we've reduced inequality, we're giving more to the middle class. And an average family will be receiving more than $2,000 a year thanks to our government, contrary to the previous government. And our ratio of debt to GDP is going down consistently.
Key Ridge.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I grew up in Calgary during Pierre Trudeau's National Energy Program, and 36 years later, we have another made-in-Canada energy crisis. This Prime Minister, has killed Northern Gateway, brought in a tanker ban, he killed Energy East by changing the application process, and he has spectacularly failed on Trans Mountain. Canada is practically giving away its energy under this government. When will they finally stop making things worse? And will they kill the No More Pipelines Bill, Bill C-36?
Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, we understand the frustration and care deeply about supporting our energy sector. Our focus is on ensuring that every barrel of Alberta oil gets its full value. That is why our government has made addressing this national issue an urgent priority. We know that the long-term solution is to build pipeline capacity and expand to global markets, so that is what we are doing. Actually, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Natural Resources, a proud Albertan, was in British Columbia having those consultations with First Nations with respect to the Trans Mountain Expansion Project. We are also in active discussions with stakeholders and provinces to look at all short-term options to make sure we get this right. Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Liberals need to stop talking about their feelings and fix the crisis they've created. Under Conservatives, 4 new pipelines were built.
built, and companies wanted to build 3 more, 2 to new markets when the Liberals came to power, but the Liberals chased them all away. Provinces, industry, and financial experts all agree that the Liberals' No More Pipelines Bill C-69 will do exactly what it is designed to do, stop any new pipeline from being proposed or built in Canada again. So will the Liberals act and commit right now to scrap their No More Pipelines Bill C-69, yes or no?
Good question.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Natural Resources.
Better rules would lead to a more timely and predictable reviews and encourage further investments in Canada's natural resources sector and in our people. The Conservatives gutted this process, and we see the result. 99% of our oil exports go to a single buyer, the United States. Their approach failed. We are working to restore trust and make sure good projects can move forward and grow our economy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Lakeland.
The reality is, in 2019, companies plan to have completed 3 brand new pipelines in Canada, but the Prime Minister deliberately sabotaged all of them.
Yep.
Those pipelines are
Right.
gone because of the Liberals, and their No More Pipelines Bill C-69 will mean no new pipelines proposed or built in Canada again. This week, Trican Well Service had to lay off 70 employees. Thousands more job losses are expected in the new year. But I guess that's what the Prime Minister wants, since apparently he thinks oil and gas and trades workers are dangerous to rural communities.
That's right.
Will the Liberals commit right now to scrap their No More Pipelines Bill C-69, yes or no?
Good question. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, while the previous government failed to get the job done, we are taking decisive action and seeing results. We secured the largest private sector investment in Canadian history through the $40 billion LNG Canada project. We are helping producers build up refining capacity here in Canada because we know that means more value for every barrel. We announced major tax incentives in the fall economic statement for refiners and upgraders. We are moving forward in the right way through meaningful consultations on the Trans Mountain Expansion Project. This is the progress that we have been making, but we know there is more work to do. That is exactly what we intend to do. Mr. President.
Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals have once again caved in to President Trump. NAFTA 2.0 contains a clause which gives the U.S. oversight on our management system. Really. Not only have Liberals sacrificed our food sovereignty, but they're telling us that they've signed a good agreement. What nerve. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Agriculture. Mr. Speaker, we understand that there will be repercussions for our producers, and we intend to support them in order to promote their success. We are working with producers and processors in the dairy sector and egg and poultry sector, and we're going to help them innovate so that they can remain competitive for generations to come. The Honourable Member for Salaberry-sur-Roi. What the member just said, Mr. Speaker, makes no sense. 3 times in 3 years, be it with CETA, the TPP, or the USMCA, the Liberals have opened a breach in the supply management system. Worse yet, there is a clause that gives the U.S. oversight on our system. The Liberals promised to protect supply management no matter what. Now our producers regret what they said and regret it bitterly. How can the Liberals continue to say that they are there to protect our farmers? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, let me repeat. The NDP says one thing here and another behind closed doors. Their leader celebrated the agreement during an event on October 30th. Now, the member for Rosemont-La Petite Patrie said this was the best possible agreement. The NDP admits in private that it's a good agreement because it protects millions of Canadian jobs that were threatened. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Dorval-Lachine. Mr. Speaker, people in Les Îles de la Madeleine had seen their communications cut by a terrible storm. They were cut off from the rest of Quebec. This afternoon, rather yesterday afternoon, they said that this emergency was beyond the capacities of the government. Will the federal government help the people in Île-de-la-Madeleine?
Minister, Public Safety.
Monsieur le Président, nos pensées.
Mr. Speaker, our thoughts are with all the people on the Magdalen Islands. I have been in touch with the minister, and we are ready to help Quebec with necessary staff. And on behalf of all Canadians, we are very grateful to all first interveners and to people who are working to help these people during this very difficult period.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberals are not taking Canada's national security seriously. New Zealand is our third of our major allies to block their biggest telecoms from giving Huawei access to their 5G network. They understand that giving the Chinese government access is cause for alarm. Why doesn't this Liberal government understand the national security risk and say no way to Huawei?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, as we've said a number of times, our government will never compromise our national security. Full well understanding, Mr. Speaker, that we need to attract foreign investment, full well understanding that 5G is part of where we are going in the future in terms of providing quality service to Canadians. Mr. Speaker, for some time now, the Conservatives have been playing politics with national security. But now it seems that the mastermind of these questions...
La translation is not working. Maybe we can test that out.
Interpretation? Is the interpretation working?
Well, I'll ask Secretary to continue.
Continue or start over, Mr. Speaker?
Okay, just start.
Okay,
if he doesn't mind, what we'll do is we'll start the time over. You can just give your full response.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I said, Mr. Speaker, our government, on a number of occasions in this House, our government will never compromise national security in these matters. Yet we have to be open to global investment, Mr. Speaker, and certainly 5G is part of our plan moving forward in order to provide a good quality service to Canadians from coast to coast to coast. For some time, Mr. Speaker, Conservatives have been playing politics with our national security. It seems the mastermind of these questions, their Director of Communications, Jake Enright, is working for the same company they say is a threat to our economic prosperity. Makes you wonder, Mr. Speaker, who they're serving.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Once again, Mr. Speaker, same subject. Australia, US, New Zealand. The Five Eyes, 2 aren't on board yet, but 3 have abandoned. Huawei have blocked it. Why does the Prime Minister not think that this is a security risk for Canada? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, as I said in English, we are open to global investments that will help our growth and our development of the 5G system. This is really important for the future. This said, we will never compromise national security, but it's very strange to see their former Director of Communications, Jake Enright, who is working for the very company they just cited. Very strange, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Charlebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Hey, it's not Mr. Enright who's asking the questions. I'm asking the questions on behalf of Canada. Mr. Speaker, let's talk about illegal migrants. We have learned that it's going to cost more than $1 billion to manage this situation. Further, yesterday, the minister misled this House and contradicted the parliamentary budget officer when he said that the system was working. And the great majority of illegal migrants come from Nigeria, which proves that the Prime Minister's irresponsible tweet is the reason for this whole mess. When are they going to put an end to this crisis? Mr. Speaker, every time the Conservatives talk about a tweet and try to make us believe it's the reason for this crisis, this really is insulting to the intelligence of all Canadians. There is an increase in migrants. We are proud of the fact that we have one of the best systems in the world to protect our borders and to make sure that everyone has access to a system that is transparent, fair, and balanced. That's what Canadians expect of us, and that's what we're doing.
Bill.
Yesterday we learned that Prime Minister's famous tweet will cost Canadian taxpayers over $1 billion by 2020. This does not include millions spent by the provinces on top of it. Right. Since that tweet, 38,000 illegal border crossers have walked into Canada. Meanwhile, real refugees who play by the rules continue to wait for years. When will the Prime Minister admit his failures at the border and fix this crisis immediately?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
I'd like to thank my colleague once again for the question. Once again, every time they try and convince Canadians that because of a tweet we have migrants coming to our borders, questions their intelligence, Mr. Speaker. The one thing that I will say is that they are very quick, Mr. Speaker, to forget their own record. In fact, 230,000 asylum seekers came into Canada under their watch. And what did they do to improve on the system, Mr. Speaker? Absolutely nothing. No, wait a minute, I made a mistake. They cut $400 million from the system. And in fact, they went so far as to cut medical services from women and children. That's their record, not ours. We're going to do better.
The Honourable Member for Abitibi, James Nunavik, EU.
The housing crisis in the north is so severe that Nunavik alone needs 1,000 houses today alone. It's a serious problem. The lack of housing leads to social challenges, marginalization, and mental health problems. A woman recently died in my riding after losing her home. The UN Declaration directs Canada to ensure the well-being of Indigenous elders, women, youth, children. The Inuit want to know, Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister call in the state of emergency to finally address the housing crisis?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Indigenous Services.
Distinction-based strategies, housing strategies with our First Nation, Inuit, and Métis partners. Budget 2018 invested $600 million over 3 years for First Nation housing, $500 million for Métis Nation housing, and $400 million for Inuit-led housing. This funding is a significant step towards addressing the housing gap in our Indigenous communities. We will continue working to close the unacceptable housing gap in Indigenous communities.
The Honourable Member for Nanaimo, Ladysmith.
As the 16 days of action to end violence against women go on, women's groups across Canada still struggle to keep their doors open. These groups give critical frontline service to women fleeing violence. They told us, quote, if you value the lives of women, you're going to appropriately fund those organizations that are serving these women and potentially saving their lives. Liberals say they want to end violence against women. Why won't they fund core, secure operations funding for these brave groups saving women's lives?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Status of Women.
Mr. Speaker. I thank the Honourable Member for the question. Our government understands that a strong and vibrant women's movement across Canada is essential to supporting the middle class and those working hard to join it. But women's organizations must have the capacity and resources to do their good work. That is why, after 10 years of being undermined by the Harper government, Mr. Speaker, we launched the Capacity Building Fund stemming from Budget 2018, an investment, Mr. Speaker, of $100 million over 5 years to increase organizational and sector capacity. The women's movement across the country has asked for a reliable, predictable, and accessible source of funds.
Honourable Member for Battle River, Crowfoot.
Mr. Speaker, Alberta is losing over $80 million a day on heavily discounted oil. We're losing foreign investment, leaving Alberta and Canada. We've lost over 100,000 jobs, and the bleeding isn't about to stop anytime soon. Why? because this government has halted, cancelled, or delayed every major energy project. They've put in ridiculously onerous regulations, and they're giving us the No Pipeline Bill C-69. Mr. Speaker, not if, but when will this Minister of Natural Resources kill Bill C-69?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let's be very clear. The piece of legislation, Bill 69, will encourage further investments because it will give investors greater certainty through shorter timelines, early engagement, and one project means one review. The Conservatives can focus on rhetoric. We'll focus on getting the job done for our energy sector. Exactly. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Bow River.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Liberal government has failed Canadian energy workers. Over 100,000 and counting are out of work. Small businesses across my riding of Bow River have been devastated, and they don't even get the carbon tax exemptions the Liberals have given to large corporations. Rather than fix the problems they've caused, the Liberals are doubling down with their anti-Canadian energy bill C-69. This bill will be the final nail in the coffin of the Canadian energy. When will this government show they care about Canadian energy workers and cancel Bill C-69?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, as I said before, Bill C-69 is meaning one project, one review to give certainty to the industry. But let me tell you, Mr. Speaker, the horizon is actually looking very well for the energy sector. I know the current times are difficult. However, over the next 10 years, there are over $500 billion in proposed private sector's investment in the natural resources sector alone. In Alberta alone, that includes 102 energy projects representing an investment of $178 billion. These projects do not just mean development for energy sources, they mean jobs for Albertans.
The Honourable Member for Kamloops, Thompson Caribou.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister promised several important pieces of Indigenous legislation before the next election. 3 years in and nothing to report. The Rights and Recognition Framework is stalled. The Language Act is nowhere to be seen. Child Welfare Act, well, today they proudly announced that someday they're going to table some legislation. Additions to reserve buried in a budget bill with no consultation. Overpromise, no delivery. Can the minister tell us if any of the promised legislation will be law before the end of this Parliament?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Indigenous Services.
Mr. Speaker, our government is delivering on a new relationship with Indigenous peoples that empowers communities and advances self-determination. New investments of $16.8 billion through budgets mean 156 new school projects, 359 new water projects, and 165,000 requests from First Nations children have been approved under Jordan's principle. We know there is more to do, and we are committed to getting the job done.
The Honourable Member for Pontiac.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My riding of Pontiac is on traditional Algonquin territory, and I'm so proud to be working with this great nation, including the Algonquin of Barrier Lake. Je collabore avec leur communauté pour
I have been discussing issues of housing and schools with their community.
Default management prevention policy has really hindered the success of this and many other First Nations communities. Our government has been working with communities to enhance financial and administrative capacity, and the Algonquin of Barrier Lake are well on their way to exiting this policy. So can the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Indigenous Services please update this House on the work underway towards a more respectful fiscal relationship with our First Nations?
The Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Indigenous Services.
Mr. Speaker, je voudrais remercier l'honorable.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the honourable member for Pontiac for his question and his work.
Relationship between Canada and First Nations based on the recognition of rights, cooperation and partnership. We are implementing proposals from First Nations, including more flexible and predictable long-term funding for eligible communities, a replacement for the default prevention and management policy, and the establishment of an advisory committee that will guide this work. We will continue to work with partners to build a strong future together for First Nations and all Indigenous peoples.
The Honourable Member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The regions of Canada have to deal with issues that are very different from those in the cities, and we have to give them the tools they need to develop. The government must respect the specificity of certain geographic areas. And from the point of view of security, these people should not be abandoned. In Abitibi-Témiscamingue, the airport of Rwanda, there, NAV Canada seems to be poised to eliminate night services. What does the minister intend to do to protect the regions? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Transport Minister. Mr. Speaker, the safety and security of our airports is extremely important to us. The Minister is working with NAV Canada to make sure that the security at airports enjoy full security, but for the present time they're not going to cancel night services. Mr. Speaker, as a Francophone, a proud Francophone, I was shocked to see what the Ontario Conservatives are doing with respect to French language services. I'd like to know if there is a plan to ensure the dynamism and flourishing of official language minority communities. The Honourable Minister, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague, the member for Vimy, for her excellent question. Our government has an excellent plan to support official languages minority communities. We have put $2.7 billion into this, and this includes funding for education and infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, we've always shouldered our responsibilities. We've done our share, and we continue to do so, and we will work to support Franco-Ontarians.
Conestoga.
Speaker, this morning the Prime Minister signed the USMCA along with the Presidents of the United States and Mexico. The problem, Mr. Speaker,
big problem,
is that Appendix 3, Sections C, 10, and 11 undermine Canadian sovereignty and our ability to manage our dairy sector without U.S. intervention.
and they're applauding it.
Canada cannot afford to hand over sovereignty of our dairy sector, effectively giving up our ability to provide food security for Canadians. Why did the Prime Minister capitulate to Donald Trump at the expense of our dairy sector?
Stand up and
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire au ministre.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, we are the ones who put supply management in place. We brought it in. We wanted to make sure that the Americans couldn't completely destroy supply management. We understand that there will be repercussions for producers, and we will compensate our producers and processors fairly and completely. The Honourable Member for Repentigny. Mr. Speaker, the National Assembly just passed a unanimous motion to denounce provisions in C-86 which offers protection to consumers with respect to credit, which is not as good as the legislation in Quebec. This motion enjoins the government to not enforce provisions affecting sectors where Quebec has already provided standards. Will the government amend C-86 to specify that Quebec legislation will continue to fully apply?
Honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And we are committed to providing the greatest protection for consumers with respect to the financial sector, and will continue to do so. The Honourable Member for Manicouagan. Mr. Speaker, this is the second time that this bank-friendly government has tried to remove rights from Quebec consumers. With C-86, there's the real possibility that the Consumer Protection Bureau will no longer be able to help people with a recourse. This means that a citizen who's been conned will have no free recourse and will have to pay to take the banks and their army of lawyers to court. Will the 40 Liberal Quebecers defend these people? Mr. Speaker, as I said, we are committed to offering the greatest possible protection to Canadian consumers and to do so with respect to provincial jurisdiction. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Calgary Skyview.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With Alberta's economy hurting,
Albertans are worried for their future. Bill C-69 is also a huge concern. Office vacancies are close to 30% in the city of Calgary, and the downtown core has lost over $12 billion in assessed value since 2015. With pipeline paralysis and oil being sold at $10 a barrel, unemployment has risen to 8.2% in Calgary. My question is to the Minister of Natural Resources. Will the Minister seriously consider province's request to help buy more rail cars in order to reduce market access backlog and to avoid cutbacks in oil production? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Natural Resources.
We understand the frustration and care deeply about supporting our energy sector. We know that the solution is to build pipeline capacity and expand to global markets. That is the work we have been doing and we will continue to do. Currently, there is no consensus within the industry on short-term solutions. That is why we are in active discussions with stakeholders in provinces, including the Alberta government, with the goal of bolstering the competitiveness of this sector. We welcome workable solutions. We will not back down from supporting this sector and the hard-working Canadians it employs.
For Regina Louvain.
USMCA, CUSMA, MUSCA. Mr. Speaker, as we hear these strange new acronyms for the deal signed this morning, we might prefer the sound of MUSAC. Certainly, we need to face the MUSAC and address the American tariffs that remain on our steel and aluminum exports. It would be MUSAC to my ears if the government could commit not to ratify the new NAFTA until those American tariffs are lifted.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Eliminating the unjustified and illegal tariffs imposed by the U.S. on Canadian steel and aluminum is a priority for our government. It is overwhelmingly in the best interests of both Canada and the United States for those reciprocal tariffs to be lifted. In the meantime, our strong responsive measures to defend our workers remain in place. Let me say this directly to Canadian steelworkers. The Government of Canada has your best interests at heart and has your back. Thank you.
Good job. Good job.
And that's all for oral questions. C'est tout pour questions orales aujourd'hui. Nous avons un appel au règlement.
Do we have a point of order? The member for Louis Saint Laurent. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. As a parliamentarian, regardless of which party we belong to, we have a duty to show respect for Canadian diplomats, particularly those working in embassies, and particularly the Mexican embassy. The member for Vaudreuil-Soulanges twice referred to our intelligence. Mr. Speaker, as we learned on April 3rd in an article in the National Post, our diplomats in Mexico City are dealing with an issue.
Monsieur le Président, ça arrive à tout le monde.
It happens to everyone, and partisan attacks are understandable, but would the member at least have the decency to say that our diplomats are doing good work and their intelligence shouldn't be insulted?
Appel au règlement, alors on va
That's not a point of order, so we'll continue. Tabling of documents.
Okay. Madame Joly, Ministre du...
Ms. Joly, excuse me, another point of order?
Appel au règlement, the Honourable Member for Calgary, Rocky Ridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And similar in that it involves the same member, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister, who in the answer to a question from the member for Markham Unionville had questioned his intelligence. And we have a long-standing policy in this House. You have ruled on this many times, Mr. Speaker, that we may not insult another member's intelligence. So I, through you, invite the Parliamentary Secretary to withdraw his comments.
Okay. I understand how it's been taken now. My apologies to the Honourable Member from Louis Saint Laurent. I encourage all members to be courteous to each other and take it under advisement that we do have or try to maintain a certain level of civility within the chamber and keep that in mind as we proceed. Dépôt de documents.
Tabling of documents. Ms. Joly, Minister of...
Oh, sorry. Sorry, there's been a bit of confusion with all the points of order. Tabling of documents, the Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Pursuant to the standing orders, I have the honor of tabling in both official languages the government's plan for working in partnership with the Government of Ontario around projects that provide for better service delivery in French in Ontario.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pursuant to Standing Order 36, Bracket 8, I have the honour to table in both official languages the government's response to 8 petitions.
Introduction of government bills. Déclaration de
Statements by ministers.
Rapport de délégation interparlementaire.
Reports from interparliamentary delegations.
Presenting reports from committees. The Honourable Member for Mississauga Lakeshore.
Mr. Speaker, I have the honour of presenting in both official languages the 27th report of the Standing Committee on Public Safety and National Security on Supplementary Estimates A 2018-19. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Dépôt de projet de loi émanant des députés.
Introduction of private members' bills. First reading of Senate public bills.
Motion.
Motions.
Presenting petitions. The Honourable Député de Repentigny.
The Honourable Member for Repentigny. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm tabling another petition this week calling on the Prime Minister to sign the order in Council that would cause the pimping legislation to enter into force. Last year it was an electronic petition. This week it's a paper-based petition. How many young women have suffered from this government's lack of action in this area? So once again, they're calling on the Prime Minister to take his pen and sign the order in Council. This is the 4th time I've called for that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Caribou.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I have a number of petitions where the people that signed them believe that for cosmetic testing only, I think it's important to note it's not research, that they believe the time has come to end testing on animals, especially with some of the new techniques that are out there. So pleased to present a number on their behalf.
Presenting petitions, the Honourable Member for Port Moody Coquitlam.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to table an electronic petition with 2,657 signatures. The petitioners are concerned about the impact gill nets are having on sturgeon. They call on the government to encourage, implement, and promote alternative sustainable salmon harvesting techniques that will reduce impact on salmon stocks of concern and eliminate sturgeon bycatch and their subsequent physical damage and mortality. Provide funding to research and implement sustainable fish harvesting technologies such as fish wheels, fish traps, and fish safe seines. Adopt policies and regulations that require gill nets to be fully attended and monitored during entire gill net soak time. This transition phase implementation will take time. Ban all nighttime gill net use. Mr. Speaker, I would like to conclude by congratulating Kevin Estrada from the Sturgeon Slayers in Chilliwack, British Columbia, for their hard work on and their important work on this petition campaign. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Presenting petitions, the Honourable Member for Winnipeg North.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to table yet another petition from what has been a fairly large number of petitions coming from residents of Winnipeg North. And what they're doing is they're asking for the Prime Minister and the government to recognize the value of a universal pharmacare program, Mr. Speaker. And they're asking the government to work with the different stakeholders, provinces and territories with the idea of adding some form of a pharmacare program to our fantastic healthcare system. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Présentation de pétitions.
Presenting petitions, the Honourable Member for Salaberry-sur-Loire. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a petition signed by 356 people across the country, which has to do with December 13th, the anniversary of the Nanjing massacre, where the Japanese army raped between 20 and 80,000 Chinese women. Those atrocities and massacres occurred under a Japanese system that spread rapidly to 250,000 women, including the Philippines and Korea. And so the petitioners call on the Government of Canada to declare December 13th of each year as a Memorial Day for the Nanjing Massacre. Presenting petitions.
Ladysmith.
Because 5 new anchorage spots are proposed for freighters 300 meters long off the island of Gabriola in my riding, Nanaimo Ladysmith. They are proposed for accepting Wyoming coal exports to China, coal that was refused by all the western U.S. ports. The petitioners urge this government to recognize that these anchorages harm fish habitat, they risk oil spills, it would introduce heavy industrial activity into quite a pristine area, and it has no local benefit whatsoever, not even benefit for Canada. They urge the government to refuse the establishment of these 5 new industrial anchorages off Gabriola. Thank you.
Presenting petitions, présentation de pétition, l'honorable député de...
The honourable member for St. Hyacinthe, St. Bagat. Mr. Speaker, the petitioners call on the Government of Canada to commit to recognizing that vision health is a public health matter. And in order to deal with this issue, especially the most vulnerable in Canada, children, seniors, people with diabetes, and Indigenous people, the government should create a national action framework to protect Canadians' eyesight by reducing issues that stem from avoidable causes and known risk factors. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Presenting petitions. Questions on the order paper. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. The following questions will be answered today. Question 19822, question 1985. And then furthermore, Mr. Speaker, if the government's response to questions number 1980 and 1981 could be made for orders for return, these returns would be tabled immediately.
Is it the pleasure of the House that the aforementioned question be made orders for return and that they be tabled immediately? Agreed and so ordered. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
And then finally, Mr. Speaker, I would ask that all remaining questions be allowed to stand at this time, please.
Is that agreed? Agreed and so ordered. Orders of the day.
Government orders, government bills, Commons.
The Poverty Reduction Act.
The Honourable Member for Elgin, Middlesex, London has 5 minutes and 45 seconds coming to her. Questions, questions et commentaires, questions and comments. The Honourable Member for St. Catharines.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for her speech, and she talks about her passion that all parties want to see the end of poverty. And I'd like to ask her about one particular policy, and that was the increase in the age to receive old age security and the guaranteed income supplement. The previous government changed that from age 65 to age 67, and that affected our most vulnerable seniors, taking $13,000 out of their pockets each year. I guess my question, Mr. Speaker, is if she's such a fan of reducing poverty, why did her and her party support that, and how can she continue to go on suggesting that poverty is a focus for the government when they're impacting our most vulnerable seniors?
The Honourable Member for Elgin, Middlesex, London.
What a question. I'll tell you, my sister Linda is going to be very mad at me because my sister, who's 56 years of age, she is not a senior. She was going to be the first person actually impacted by these changes of old age security when they were announced by our government. There has been so much information that this government had put out about old age security, reducing poverty. That change to old age security was not put into effect immediately. It was looking over time. Like many of the other countries across this world that are now increasing old age security from 65 to 67 based on life expectancies, studies, and a variety of different things, that is very important things that we look at. But may I note for this member, as I've indicated, these statistics that we have today are indicating that poverty for seniors has been increased under this government by 2%.
Questions et commentaires, questions and comments. L'Honourable Député.
The Honourable Member for Hochelaga. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleague talked about jobs, so I have a question about that. and about the North in general. I traveled with my colleague from Nunavik who represents Nunavik, so I traveled within that region, and I noticed that there were a lot of overcrowded houses, 14 people living in one house, and I saw that there were a lot of problems with the cost of food, but people in the North had solutions to suggest, for example, building greenhouses and producing their own food. But one of the big problems is that they don't have the infrastructure. For example, the electricity. The dams aren't far away from them, but they don't have access to that power. So if people were brought in to build houses, there could be more jobs. The houses could be better suited to the climate and the culture. So a number of problems could be solved all at once. And when it comes to jobs, does my colleague agree with this type of thinking, the honourable member?
I remember a few years ago when the poverty reduction study was being studied in this HUMA committee, and I happened to be part of that committee during that study. And actually, we had somebody who who lived on the reserve, who talked about the opportunity for economic development. I think it is imperative for our government and our future government, I was speaking our government as the Conservatives in 2019, but for this government to recognize that we need to make sure that we provide opportunities for First Nations people to have these economic opportunities. The cost of food is extravagant, and there is something that we need to do there as well. But we just saw last week that they are increasing the money, yet not tackling the problem that we have with our Food North strategies. So there's many things that we need to do, but we need to have all partners at the table, and including the Indigenous people. Their voices need to be heard.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Edmonton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague from Middlesex, London, for her passion for poverty reduction and the file. One of the things we hear a lot about this government is announcement, but no delivery. In fact, someone made the comment the other day, they get an A for announcement, but a D for delivery. Now, the Institute of Fiscal Studies, which is headed by former Parliamentary Budget Officer Kevin Page, put out a report on for the National Housing Strategy, in which he comments he's not able to find the money. We heard the Parliamentary Secretary say, oh, we've spent $5 billion so far. In fact, Kevin Page's organization, in the 5 years going forward, can only find $1.5 billion that's actually been budgeted, much less spent. Now, he says the National Housing Strategy is purely a glossy document with no delivery. I wonder if the member would agree with that.
The honourable member for Elgin, Middlesex, London.
Oh, sorry, and thank you very much for that question. I actually had the opportunity to sit down with that group that you're referring to review some of these documents. And I think it's very much the truth. We saw funding in the 2016 and 17 year for the National Housing Strategy, and then the rest we see in this document. It has not been budgeted. But the bottom line here is they talk, but they do not deliver. So I think the biggest thing is when we're talking about a delivery of a D, that's exactly where they're at. This government may have some ideas, but they do not know how to implement. And that is the biggest challenge that we've seen from this government in the last 3 years. We have seen the economy that is just becoming so dismal in places like Alberta. They do not know how to deliver on good promises.
Reprise du débat.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte. Mr. Speaker, today I have the privilege of rising and speaking on an issue I know well. For the second time in this Parliament, a bill on poverty reduction has been tabled in the House. So, bravo, and thank you to my colleague, the Minister of Families, Children and Social Development, for his commitment to those the most in need. With this bill, he's following in the steps of Ed Broadbent, who adopted a motion to eliminate child poverty in 1989. He's also following in the footsteps of Tony Martin, Jean Crowder, and other women and men in politics who made the fight against poverty their main commitment. Now, if you look at the numbers, a bill like this is certainly very appropriate. This month we're marking the National Children's Day and National Housing Day, and you know that these kinds of days are so important. We don't mark them to celebrate, but rather to sound the alarm. They allow people to become aware of these issues and of the hard realities that our fellow citizens face on a daily basis. On this day, associations and community organizations went to the barricades. We are a rich country. We have a great wealth of resources. However, so many of our children and fellow citizens grow and live in poverty. The numbers are alarming. More than 250,000 individuals end up homeless every year. 1.7 million households live in unhealthy lodgings or lodgings that are too expensive. And unfortunately, that's not all the studies say. The situation of children is particularly serious. 1.4 million children live in poverty. That's more than one child in three living in Indigenous communities as well. Given how urgent this situation is, and given that this is part of the New Democrats' DNA, I'm telling the House that we will support this bill. However, I'm still surprised because in February 2016, more than 2 years ago, I tabled a bill on poverty reduction. This bill was the outcome of sustained discussions with organizations throughout the country. The bill had received support from several poverty organizations and was part of the community work that I had been involved in for more than 10 years to improve the daily lives of people in Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte. Bill C-245's purpose is to strengthen the safe economic and social safety net of citizens. I wanted social condition to be part of the Canadian Human Rights Act so that poverty would no longer be a basis for discrimination. I had also named community organizations, municipalities, and provinces as being the preferred partners in this poverty reduction strategy. Let's be clear. If our federal role is to show the way, to be leaders, then we have to use the support of these stakeholders who work on a daily basis to support the most vulnerable. As you know, the Liberals and the Conservatives voted in large part against this bill. Why? Well, because the Liberals said they were going to do better to reduce poverty in the country. Was that promise kept? I don't believe it was. Let's be clear. Bill C-87 is necessary, but it only skims the issue of poverty. Mr. Speaker, I'm asking the Liberal government, where are the emergency measures needed to eradicate poverty amongst our fellow citizens? The minister announced that this bill would make Canada a leader when it comes to poverty reduction, but I do not believe that. I salute the efforts made to date, like the Canada Child Benefit, but let's be clear, we're still far from what we need to do, and Bill C-87 simply sets the minimum targets recommended by the United Nations. No new investments, no new programs. What does this bill actually have? Mr. Speaker, minimum targets and a very questionable poverty line. I have questions about this poverty line. Does Canada really want to become a leader in poverty reduction when it just goes to the lowest common denominator? Because that's what we're talking about. Poverty organizations are afraid that subsidy programs will no longer be provided to the most vulnerable because they've been excluded from the government statistics. The poverty line used by the Liberals is simply a replica of the market basket measure. And I'm going to say it again before this House. This metric is simply a smokescreen. It hides the reality of poverty in this country. The economist Andrew Jackson showed that the low-income cutoff accounts for 828,000 seniors who are living in poverty, but the market basket measure only shows 284,000 over the same period of time. Will the government really use these biased figures and neglect 500,000 seniors that have been forgotten by this metric? Besides ignoring poverty, real poverty, this metric does not lift people out of poverty. Mr. Speaker, here we have a metric that measures the income that is a metric, rather, that measures the income necessary to buy the basic necessities. The market basket measure excludes many, many expenditures that are part of daily life, like health care, child care. Furthermore, once you have that income, you're very far from having been lifted out of poverty. Just because you meet that metric doesn't mean you're not poor. Leaving our fellow citizen in uncertainty and under financial stress is not acceptable. This week, my team had discussions with the organization called Comptoir Partage l'Ami in Saint-Hyacinthe. Volunteers provide support to approximately 200 families living in precarious financial difficulty every week to help them make ends meet. But that assistance isn't just handed out willy-nilly. These cases are studied on a case-by-case basis so that the best assistance possible can be provided. And do you know what? Their cutoff is $100 more than basic income, the basic income cutoff, because these people know, working on the ground, that these individuals in need are not trying to milk the system. Precariousness is real. And $100 worth of leeway may allow someone to just pay another couple of bills or allow them to pay for something unexpected, like a car that is broken down. These organizations have very few resources, but they still do miracles in our communities, and I congratulate them. They do this despite the fact that they receive not much federal government assistance. But they are able to look at reality on the ground in the face. I'm so disappointed that this government that was saying it was so ambitious is not able to truly see the poverty that affects children and families in Canada. This bill should not simply satisfy itself with artificially reducing numbers. It should take concrete steps. First of all, existing programs should be reviewed. Today, several families do not receive the Canada Child Benefit, in particular in remote Indigenous communities. However, these communities are those that are the most exposed to precarious conditions and poverty. Out of 20% of poor children in Canada, a third of them are in an Indigenous community. Poverty is an ongoing cycle that affects entire families, and to break that cycle, we need to deal with the structural inequalities that affect these children from birth. We also have to reform the unfair employment insurance system. When the government hasn't had enough money in the employment insurance coffers, and after 20 years of conservative and liberal reforms, this system is in a pitiful state and is incapable of supporting the families who most need it. It is not acceptable that we have a system that hasn't been truly reformed since the 70s and that excludes 60% of our workers. Reforming employment insurance would first and foremost lift families out of precariousness and even poverty. But one mustn't forget that because it is so hard to access this system, workers are having a hard time even accessing training that meets their needs. And we're talking, Mr. Speaker, about the middle class and those working hard to join it. Access to federal benefits should not have to be so hard for the most vulnerable. Mr. Speaker, we are not all equal when we live in poverty, and therefore employment insurance has to be broadened, and we have to make sure that the Canada Child Benefit reaches everyone. We need to make sure that the grandparents who are taking care of a child also be able to receive it. And the same for seniors. I congratulate the government on the initiative to make it automatic for seniors who reach 65 years old to be able to get their old age security immediately. But the reality is that there are still many seniors who don't receive this benefit. I sent an open letter last January to tell federal citizens about this, and I received hundreds of emails and calls, and I learned that actually it hasn't been automatic. So why not extend this measure to all workers who have worked their whole life to build this country? We also need to adopt the low-income cutoff to calculate poverty. It sets the poverty line at half of the median income and is much more realistic. It also allows for international comparisons. And I would think that the government would want that, given that it wants to be a world leader. We also need more ambitious short-term goals. The day before this bill was tabled, on November 5th, British Columbia adopted a bill to reduce child poverty by 50% in 5 years. Poverty organizations have been calling for this. Do we really need to wait another decade to act and thus allow a generation of children to grow up in poverty? We need to help the future generations of this country now. Let's not fool ourselves. These programs are a first step, but they only deal with a part of the problem. By refusing to tackle poverty on all fronts, we won't be able to radically change the face of poverty in this country. We need to be brave, and we need to adopt new, more ambitious and fairer measures for Canadians. Mr. Speaker, reducing poverty calls for an in-depth reform of our society. We can't just simply satisfy ourselves with sending out checks. And when you pay almost $80 a day per child for a spot in a daycare, well, you can see that the Canada Child Benefit is not sufficient and doesn't really change people's situations much. What would give people some breathing room is a universal, affordable daycare system throughout the country. This government promised to tackle poverty head-on, not just skim the surface. Therefore, I'm calling on this government to respect its commitments and act accordingly. These are Canadians who need this, and they need a complete reform of our services and our public policies. Martin Luther King said that true compassion requires more than just giving a coin to a beggar. When a whole structure is producing beggars, then we have to start from the foundation up. That is how we can deal with inequalities at their very root. How do we do that? Well, we have to start with a universal, affordable daycare system. The organization Canada 2000, the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, says that this should be a keystone for reducing poverty. This kind of service is essential for parents so that they no longer have to choose between paying for an expensive daycare or going to work. It would help reduce poverty amongst women who are particularly affected when they have to choose between daycare for their children or returning to weeks. Affordable, good quality daycare is also means being on an equal footing for all children coming from vulnerable sectors. The same applies to non-repayable healthcare costs and to dental costs that really are a burden for families to budget for. How can you talk about an egalitarian society if we're not all equal when it comes to healthcare? Pharmacare and reimbursing dental care is absolutely necessary because that helps attack the roots of inequality as well. We have been saying over and over again that work is what helps people be lifted out of poverty, and it guarantees dignity. But work isn't available to all. So let us set up a basic guaranteed income for those people who need it. I'm thinking of those individuals who can no longer work because of, for example, physical or mental constraints. Mr. Speaker, believe me, this is not a choice. This is a disability that affects people on a daily basis, and it's our role, the role of parliamentarians and the role of government, to provide a decent income for a decent livelihood. So let us establish a guaranteed basic income to preserve dignity and reduce the stigma that so many of our fellow citizens are dealing with. Reducing poverty also can be tackled through a fair tax system. There has to be better distribution of wealth so that those more vulnerable groups also benefit. Reducing poverty means seeing society holistically as one picture. We have to look at the causes of inequality. We have to make sure that inequality is dealt with and that it doesn't increase over the years simply to benefit the wealthiest. The government cannot, on the one hand, boast a poverty reduction plan. We have to have new programs. I'd just like to recall that every year we're losing $8 billion from a lack of political courage. Let us stop this masquerade. This bill is not enough to tackle poverty in this country. Campaign 2000, Citizens for Public Justice, le Collectif pour un Québec sans pauvreté, le Mouvement Action Chômage, FRAPU, the Elizabeth Fries Society, the Broadbent Institute are all calling for more ambitious measures from this government. The OECD recommends measures that support employment, makes up for a low income, and increases full-time daycare spots at an affordable price for families. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to underscore the work that so many employees and volunteers from community organizations have done to assist the most vulnerable. The Centre de Bénévolat de Saint-Hyacinthe, that is celebrating 50 years this works hard to support people the most in need. You know, when you work on the ground, initiatives and recommendations coming from Ottawa are far away. What really counts is being able to give mothers of families who are struggling under their debt to receive assistance. It means helping retired people receive the assistance they need to receive their GIS, for example. At these centers that I have mentioned, everyone says the same thing. Precariousness is real, and it extends well beyond a basket of main necessities. Single people are the most vulnerable, and their income is insufficient. Claudine Gauvin, the director of Moisson Mascouten, told me that out of 870 requests for food assistance during Christmas, more than half of those requests were made by single people. And amongst those people, those who were ill were particularly affected because of the cost, the exorbitant cost of their health care. Through their actions, the Moisson Mascouten and the Centre de Bénévolat de Saint-Hyacinthe, the Acton Vale organization and the organization Le Comptoir Partage l'Ami are providing necessary support to our community. They collect toys for children. They organize snacks. They organize soup kitchens and collective kitchens, and they provide strong social connections for those who are most isolated and most vulnerable. I don't want to hear the government saying over and over again that the Canada Child Benefit is going to take care of everything. I think the actions of these community organizations should guide us here in Ottawa, and that we should work together on this bill in committee. Our only goal should be to make sure that our work has a true impact on these people and helps them tackle poverty. Above and beyond targets and metrics, we need to deal with poverty through concrete actions that will profoundly change our services and our public policies. I'd like to conclude by just recalling a few words that Ed Broadbent spoke more than 30 years ago. He said that as a nation, we have to affirm today that before the beginning of the 21st century, child poverty will be a thing of the past. Well, that failure should guide what we do today. There are forgotten promises, there are commitments that weren't kept, and meanwhile, the situation of our children is not a thing of the past. It has become a plague. We have, by 18 years, missed that target. It was in 1989 that he wanted to make sure that by the year 2000, poverty would be a thing of the past. We are far from it. Mr. Speaker, I would like you to remember one thing from my remarks. Let us be ambitious. Let us be ambitious and honest for the sake of our children who deserve that we eradicate this cycle of poverty. We owe it to them now.
Questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Oakville.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I wanted to thank my honourable colleague for her remarks. Just reflecting a bit on my own community of Oakville, as of 2016, 25% of households in the town of Oakville are spending 30% or more of their income on housing costs. 11% of households in the town of Oakville were in core housing needs, and 50% of new housing sales in Oakville were below an affordable threshold. So, Mr. Speaker, it's safe to say that the National Housing Strategy, the first one of its kind, has already started, and that some of the important work that we need to done to achieve Canada's poverty reduction targets are already underway, with many more to come. My question to my honourable colleague is, could she reflect because she was looking for concrete actions on the National Poverty Strategy. Can she reflect on the National Housing Strategy and the improvements that she'll be seeing in her own riding from that initiative?
L'honorable député de Saint-Hyacinthe.
The honourable member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagot. I think it's critical to have a national housing strategy. On the other hand, once again, in its strategy, I think the people of my riding have been forgotten. With respect to modestly priced housing, there are still 200 households who are waiting for affordable housing. There are people in villages in my riding who are afraid to leave their village because they are worried about housing. People in my riding feel forgotten. It seems to them that once the cities are taken care of, there's nothing left for them. We'd like to see something more ambitious that would make sure that housing, affordable housing, is something that we can have now. There are people who pay rent and hardly have enough left to live on. We want an ambitious strategy now. Questions and comments?
Le député de Laurier-Sainte-Marie.
The honourable member for Laurier-Sainte-Marie. First of all, I'd like to thank my colleague for her excellent speech and her true engagement in reducing poverty, something that all New Democrats share. And we share her engagement and her commitment, not only out of generosity, not only out of our commitment to leave no one behind, but because it benefits everyone. There are studies that show that when you reduce inequality, it's not only the most vulnerable who are healthier, but it's the wealthiest people who are healthier. Society entire benefits. Fighting poverty is not only the right thing to do, it's the intelligent thing to do. It benefits everyone. And I think the priority in terms of investments should always be to invest in our fellow citizens. The honourable member. Groups who are fighting poverty say that it costs more not to act to reduce poverty than to act. When I brought forward my private member's bill, I consulted people in my riding, and it was business people who told me that the rate of poverty in communities put the brakes on the economy in the area. We have to invest in health care. We need universal pharmacare. By doing this, we would save millions, billions. Now, there are concrete measures we could introduce now that would help people now, not in 5 years or later. We could cut the rate of poverty. And we could also benefit the economic development of our regions. Questions and comments?
Member for Spadina, Fort York.
I'd like to thank the member opposite to her comprehensive list of ideas and initiatives that she clearly supports and has been a long-time advocate for, are measures that this government is considering, in particular around EI reform, and in particular around making sure that we do more than just the Canada Child Benefit. For example, the $7.5 billion in early learning and childcare investments that we've made, which are locked in now for the next 10 years, bilaterals with the various provinces, as well as the investments with Indigenous governments in an Indigenous-led childcare program, are part of those long-term investments that go well beyond the Canada Child Benefit, which has already lifted 300,000 children out of poverty. But my question for the member opposite, because I still haven't had an explanation, I've raised the issue a dozen times in the House now. On page 66 of the platform, when considering the housing crisis in this country, and I know the party opposite spoke about this prior to the last election, so it couldn't have been absent from their imagination as they put together their platform, but in years 2017, 2018, and 2019, their investments into affordable housing were 0, 0, and 0. and their spending on homelessness, which we doubled to $220 million by increasing it by $100 million, their attack on homelessness was only going to be $10 million a year. And finally, the Indigenous housing program, the only commitment they made to it would have been delivered this year was $25 million. That was for all the water plants, all the schools, all the hospitals, all the community centres, and all the housing, including the repairs to the housing that she spoke of as being overcrowded. When they look at their platform, do they regret the platform they put in front of Canadians last time, and will they promise to do better in the next election?
The honourable member. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd be happy to be in government and have somebody tell me what I don't know about poverty. With respect to EI, the government has to invest in the EI fund. It has not put a penny in the fund. Now, 6 out of 10 workers does not have a right to EI. Now, the government has had this generosity to create programs by taking money out of a fund where they don't put a penny in. I think they should either contribute or they should put money back into the fund if they're going to use the money for other things. Because he talked about daycare. We're not talking about affordable universal daycare. We see what that can do. When we brought it in Quebec, it allowed women to go back to work. It had a huge impact. Provinces are already have progressed forward more than the government in terms of eliminating poverty and providing daycare. Organizations are involved, municipalities, provinces, and territories are involved. All they need is the leadership of this government to eliminate poverty. Questions and comments? The honourable member for Hochelaga, a short question, about a minute, please. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In Montreal, we have what we call share stores, magasins partage. One of the biggest is in my riding of Hochelaga. Now, I'm afraid that next year we won't be able to serve as many people. Right now we serve over 800 households in one place I'm thinking of. But Elena Farhar, who is the director of Poverty Free Canada, she said that the government has brought in no ideas or programs to deal with excessive poverty in Canada since 2015. Does my colleague have the same fears as I do? The honourable member. Yes, I share her fears. I'm going to tell you a little story. I was at the dinner at a golf tournament to help a palliative care center where the two co-chairs, one was an eminent business person in my riding. Now, people who go to these kind of charity tournaments are usually wealthy, and what they were saying was that the gap between rich and poor is becoming far too wide, and that it would affect all of our society. So when the wealthiest in our society realize that this gap is simply untenable, that it's time to act in order to reverse the trend. We're talking about 300,000 people. You're talking about 300,000 children that have been lifted out of poverty, but there remain 1.4 million to be lifted out of poverty. Resuming debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And before I begin, I'd like to inform you that I will be splitting my time with the member for Sackville, Preston, Chesterfield. Mr. Speaker, thank you for the opportunity to take part in today's debate about Bill C-87. This bill is important and needs the support of all parliamentarians. This bill is important because it is enacting legislation for Canada's first ever National Poverty Reduction Strategy. This strategy brings together the many elements of poverty reduction policies and programs that our government has introduced and implemented since taking office. Since 2015, our government has been focused on growth that benefits everyone. We have taken concrete steps to strengthen the middle class and help those working hard to join it. And today, I would like to use my time to speak more specifically about some of these concrete measures and steps that we have taken. I actually want to mention one of the first things that we did coming into office. Of course, I'm talking about improving the income security of our Canadian seniors. Mr. Speaker, we all know that Canada's population is aging. Canada has a growing number of seniors. It is approximately 6.4 million people who are 65 years of age and over. In the 2016 census, it's the first time that our seniors population outnumbered the number of our youth, 14 and under. In the next 25 years, this number is estimated to reach over 11 million people, which represents 1/4 of the population. Any way you look at it, Canadians are living longer and healthier lives. This increasing longevity, Mr. Speaker, is good news, and it should be celebrated because it brings with it more wisdom, experience, and expertise that is being offered to our communities. We are grateful for the contributions that our seniors make to our homes, to our families, to our places of worship, to our workplaces, and we want to encourage their vibrant participation. But as a government, we recognize it's our duty to make sure that seniors have the support they need to thrive and to prosper. And when I was first appointed, honored and humbled to serve in this role as Minister of Seniors, and when I was first appointed, the Prime Minister asked me to do something very important. He asked me to travel across the country and to listen to our seniors, to listen to their family members, to listen to organizations that work with and for seniors. And I have been doing that. And I wish to concede and admit that income security is something that is stated as something that is important to our seniors. Also, Mr. Speaker, let's look at the factors facing Canada's seniors today. Study after study has shown that women are especially vulnerable to financial difficulties. In fact, almost all single female seniors who live in poverty rely on government benefits as their major source of income. For a number of seniors, old age security and the guaranteed income supplement are not extra sources of disposable income. For many, they are the only sources of income and are used to pay rent and to buy food. Our government knows the facts, Mr. Speaker. We've taken steps to improve seniors' income security. That's where the Old Age Security Program comes in. The Old Age Security Program, or OAS as it's commonly referred to, has a clear purpose, and that is to provide a minimum level of income to seniors and contribute to their income replacement in retirement. The OAS program is actually composed of a number of benefits. First is the OAS pension, which is paid to everyone who is 65 years of age and older who meets the residence and legal status requirements. Second is the guaranteed income supplement for low-income seniors. And third are the allowances for low-income Canadians aged 60 to 64 who are the spouses or common-law partners of GIS recipients, or who are widows or widowers. In recognizing income security as an issue for seniors, when we came to office, we immediately repealed the previous government's measure to move the eligibility age of OAS and GIS from 65 to 67. This act in and of itself prevented 100,000 seniors from entering into poverty. Mr. Speaker, the benefits under the OAS pension are putting thousands of dollars into the pockets of the lowest income Canadian seniors each year. Another of our actions was to increase the guaranteed income supplement by up to $947 per year for the most vulnerable single seniors. Mr. Speaker, this improved the financial security of close to 900,000 seniors and is lifting approximately 57,000 seniors out of poverty. It was the right thing to do. Last year, we launched a new automatic enrollment for the Guaranteed Income Supplement benefit for those who are entitled to it. You see, the GIS provides much-needed monthly, non-taxable benefits to OAS pension recipients who have a low income. And since last December, when an eligible senior is automatically enrolled for OAS, Employment and Social Development Canada automatically reviews their household income to see if they are eligible for GIS benefits. If they are eligible, they will be automatically enrolled in it without needing to apply. Mr. Speaker, 210,000 seniors are now receiving this benefit as a result of the automatic enrollment. Each month, over 18,000 individuals turning 64 years of age are being automatically enrolled in the OAS pension. This means that these clients are also being automatically assessed for their eligibility for GIS without ever having to complete an application. Mr. Speaker, our actions to improve seniors' income security does not stop there. We have also enhanced the Canada Pension Plan for today's workers. This enhancement will increase the CPP retirement benefits that people receive when they retire. It will also provide larger benefits for contributors with disabilities, widows, and widowers. This also means that contributions are increasing accordingly, typically by 1% for most people. Enhanced benefits will grow over time as people work and contribute to the plan. And today's youngest workers can receive up to 50% more from the CPP when they retire. These changes to the CPP will reduce the number of families at risk of not being able to maintain their quality of life in retirement by a quarter. Mr. Speaker, in the area of workplace pensions, our government made a commitment in the 2018 budget. This commitment was restated in my mandate letter, and that was to consult with stakeholders on this very important issue. And I'm very pleased to announce, Mr. Speaker, that last week, together with the Minister of Innovation, we announced that consultations have now been opened up nationally. And I would encourage all Canadians who have expertise or who wish to share a story to go online and to give their valuable input on this very important matter. Mr. Speaker, our government is looking for a solution that works, not a Band-Aid solution. This is a decades-old problem. We recognize the seriousness and the complexity of this problem, and we're working to get this right. Mr. Speaker, seniors are an important part of our communities, and our government places enormous value on their contributions. We know that when a senior can contribute to society, everyone benefits. Seniors have so much to contribute, and we want to encourage them to continue to make these worthy contributions. It's only fair that they should get the recognition and support they need so they can have the secure retirement they deserve and look forward to their years ahead. Bill C-87 will help us do just that by enacting legislation for Canada's first ever national poverty reduction strategy. It's up to each and every one in this House to decide whether or not they want to contribute to the well-being of Canada's seniors. It is my hope that all parliamentarians will vote in favour of this legislation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Kamloops Thompson Caribou.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And The minister talked about the senior poverty rates, and if I look at the data, as I understand it, it's actually identical to when we took office. So I guess that's one thing I certainly have not seen a reduction in the poverty rates from seniors from the data that I've read. I also find it absolutely stunning that they have a bill that really is a bill without anything in the annex, so that it's kind of like they're today where they talked about how they're going to do child welfare legislation and we're going to introduce a bill someday. Here we have a bill that's introduced that actually really doesn't have any teeth, that is going to make a meaningful difference for people on the ground. So, you know, certainly as we analyze what this government does, their ability to sort of have a lot of talk but not make a real difference for people in communities that are suffering is quite stunning.
Yeah. The Honourable Minister for Seniors.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for her question. In fact, our government has invested $22 billion across all programs since we've taken office, and this has actually resulted in lifting 650,000 Canadians out of poverty. With respect to the issue she raises of seniors, which she knows is close to my heart, the actual stats, according to Canada's official poverty line of the MBM method, in 2015, we were at 5.1%. Now we are at 4.9%, 2016. But we recognize that there's more work to do, and that's why this legislation is so important. This legislation is taking the bold move of recording, of coming up with a poverty line and committing to that line. I've had constituents and others say to me the importance of, okay, let's commit to a measure, and then let's track that. And that's exactly what we are doing in this legislation. With respect to seniors in particular, you know, the OAS and the GIS rollback from 67 to 65, this prevented 100,000 seniors from going into poverty, as well as the GIS increase, the bump up, which lifted 57,000 seniors out of poverty. It's just unfortunate that the Conservatives didn't support either of those two measures, but we're going to continue to work hard to ensure that our seniors receive the secure future that they deserve.
Questions and comments, questions et commentaires. L'honorable député de Sherbrooke.
The honourable member for Sherbrooke. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm happy to be able to ask my colleague a question about this important bill. The government voted against my colleague from Saint-Hyacinthe's legislation that proposed a national anti-poverty plan, and the government plan is actually worse than the one put forward by my colleague. And when her bill was debated, the government said, this bill isn't good enough, we're going to do better. And yet today we're dealing with an even less ambitious piece of legislation than my colleagues. And one of the reasons for that is the measure that's proposed to measure the scope of the problem. They decided to use the consumption basket or grocery cart, if you will, instead of what we had proposed. And so they have substantially lowered the estimate of how many seniors are living in poverty because of the measuring tool that they've used. In fact, there are many more seniors living in poverty than that tool would suggest. Why did they use the most conservative estimate, the most conservative tool? Honourable Minister.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much to my colleague for that question.
Speaker, and I think it's important that I eventually get to the point I'm bilingual, so I'll continue to work on that. Mr. Speaker, this is a very bold plan. The market basket measure is a measure that also takes into consideration other services like health services. And so I would say that our government here is committing to a very bold plan. The plan is by 2020 to reduce poverty by 20%, by 2030 by 50%. And if we look at the Canadians that are living in poverty now, we will be at 10% by 2020 and 6% by 2030. Ultimately, we'd like to see that at 0%, Mr. Speaker, and we'll continue to work hard to ensure that our government's programs and policies keep this in mind and drive that poverty in our country down.
Resuming debate, reprise du débat, l'honorable député de Sac.
The honourable member for Sackville Prescott Chesapeake. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
As I said, the members and the people in my constituency of Sackville Prescott Chesapeake. I have the honour of speaking on C-87, Poverty Reduction Act. Mr. Speaker, this is an exciting time, if you want. You know, Canada is a great nation, and many people want to immigrate to this great country. We continue to focus and work hard towards this just society. What we want to see in our country, Mr. Speaker, is to see the wealthiest Canadians pay their fair share, and to do a little more, Mr. Speaker, to help the middle class, to help to create opportunities for those in the middle class, for those striving to reach the middle class. We need to make sure that we have safety nets in place so that people don't fall below the poverty line. And we have the responsibility to help those that are under the poverty line to come and reach other to get to the middle class and above. That's the focus. But it's hard to believe, Mr. Speaker, that in Canada, 1 in 8 Canadians are below the poverty line. When we say all the great things that are happening, we still have more work to do. And throughout my speech, I'll show the many areas that our government is focusing, investing in different initiative programs to ensure that we're helping, as I said, those below the poverty line, those striving to be in the middle class, and the middle class Canadians. Now, what's great about this act, this bill, Mr. Speaker, is that we have set clear targets. We have said that we would reduce 20% by 2020 and 50% by 2030. And to do that, Mr. Speaker, we have to have a baseline. And we have to have a baseline that we can ensure and monitor to see if they're achieving above or below that baseline. This is the first time ever that we have that baseline, and the review, it's a regular automatic review that will be going on as we move forward so that we can make the adjustments that are required. One thing that this Act does, it establishes the National Advisory Council, which will help the minister, if you want, give advice to the minister to monitor how the activities are moving on the ground, where the funding is going, and how it's affecting the objective that we're trying to move forward under. But also, Mr. Speaker, we're going to be consulting. This Advisory Council will continue its work to consult with all Canadians, of course, but also consult with academic communities, also consult with Indigenous people, consulting with people that are below the poverty line, Mr. Speaker. Those are very, very important. But also, what's important is the transparency that we have in this bill. By that, Mr. Speaker, I mean that each year we will have to report to the minister the progress that's happening on the ground. And we will also have the advice from the National Council to the minister made public. Now, that's transparency. What is the progress based on our targets? And what's the advice being given to the minister to see if the minister is following through on that advice? Those are clear steps, Mr. Speaker. Now, when I talk about that just society, as I indicated, we need to make sure that the wealthiest Canadians are paying, but we need to make sure that we're lifting those below the poverty line. We need to make sure that we're lifting those striving to be in the middle class to help them along. We need to ensure that we're creating opportunities so that the middle class can continue to prosper, that more people can contribute at the middle class, and that the wealthiest Canadians are contributing as well. But also, Mr. Speaker, what's important is putting safety guards, safety nets, if you want, ensuring that people in the middle class are not falling below the middle class or under the poverty line. So it's three very, very important pillars that is part of this act, which is essential. And that's what I want to focus my speech on, Mr. Speaker, is what things have we done and are we doing and will we do to ensure that all Canadians live above the poverty lines, that all Canadians have opportunities. So let's look at what we've done when it comes to the first pillar, which is the basic needs. We, as a government, introduced, very shortly after coming into power, we introduced the CCB, which, Mr. Speaker, contributes directly to families with kids, Mr. Speaker, to help them. In my riding alone, $5.2 million per month is received through the CCB for families in the riding of Sackville, Preston, Chesapeake. That's $60 million a year. That's happening across the country, Mr. Speaker. Very important. We've invested in the National Housing Strategy, 10 years, $40 billion. In the riding of Sackville, Preston, Chesapeake, 155 units have been built in the last year and a half, and that's an investment over $1 million. Affordable housing, again focusing, making sure it's a just society, focusing on vulnerable peoples. Mr. Speaker, seniors, veterans, families with living in fleeing domestic violence, people with disabilities. This is the focus that we have as a government. Homelessness, which is a very challenging as well. And in my committee, Veteran Affairs, we're now discussing about veterans being homeless and how can we ensure that we can identify them and help them. And one key avenue is through housing, of course, Mr. Speaker. And we've done other things to support, of course, our veterans, the Canadian Forces, income support, the Caregivers Recognition Benefit, the War Veterans Allowance. Those are major investments to support our veterans. As far as the second pillar, opportunities, it's all about education. Education is the equalizer. So we've invested in early learning and childhood. In Nova Scotia alone, $11 million over 3 years. We've invested again in the Canada Student Grants and loans for low-income Canadians, again trying to support these individuals. We've invested in veterans when it comes to the education and training benefit, $40,000 if they had 6 years experience or service, and $80,000 for 12 years experience. Indigenous skills and employment, we've invested $450 million. Youth employment strategy, Mr. Speaker. The Women's Apprenticeship Incentive and the pay equity legislation, and of course, a couple of weeks ago, our legislation around accessibility, which was crucial. Also, I need to speak about the Black Canadians. My riding of Sackville, Preston, Chesapeake in Preston is the oldest Black Indigenous community in Canada, and we have the biggest Black Culture Centre in Canada. Right. Under the last pillar, Mr. Speaker, for protecting safeguard, safe nets, making sure people don't fall below the poverty line, we've introduced the new Canada Workers' Benefit, which has seen 300 Canadians lifted to the middle class. 300,000, sorry, Mr. Speaker. That's now over 2 million Canadians. And also the unemployment insurance. We reduced the wait time from 2 weeks to 1 week. The parental sharing benefit, which is 5 additional weeks for parents. And finally, the Canada Pension Plan, because we know that Canadians today don't have access to benefits and pensions like they did before. So this will help them with a strong Canada Pension Plan. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Bravo. Questions et commentaires. Questions and comments. L'honorable député.
The honourable member for Rosemont-La Petite Patrie. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for his speech and his vigor. His voice really booms in this place. But I'd like to use a concrete example because in my riding, I looked around. There's 14,000 people earning less than $10,000 a year, and 36,000 people earning less than 20 grand a year. I have a county where about 80% of residents are renters. 1 in 3 spends more than 30% of their budget on rent. Those are real poverty situations. Unfortunately, the Liberal plan to build social housing that's affordable, most of the money is backloaded. It won't flow for years from now, but those people need help now. What does the member say to those people who need social housing now? The Honourable Member for Sackville, Preston Chechachook. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, I'd like to thank my colleague for his question. You have to recognize that we've built over 14,000 new units, housing units, and that's very important. You also have to note that there's a lot of other investment going on. You can't deal with poverty with just one strategy. It's a whole group of strategies that fit together, and that's important. But there's one thing I should say, and I'll have to say it in English so that it comes out right.
Be the enemy of good. Ceci, c'est très, très bon. C'est peut-être pas...
So it's a good plan, but we're going to keep working to make it even better in the future.
It's the Honourable Member for Yellowhead.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for his speech. You know, I was just doing a little research, and the Netherlands has probably the lowest amount of poverty in relation to seniors anywhere in the world. And if you look at Canada, you know, back in 1976, there was about 36% of the seniors were in the poverty roll, and now that has dropped considerably down to the level where we are today. But I was noting that the only way the Netherlands can keep their numbers down is by supporting their seniors by way of pensions. Everyone gets a pension. And I wonder why the Liberal government in their bill C-87 did not address the issue of pensions for seniors who have lived in Canada for at least, say, 55 or 65 years of their life.
Honourable Member for Sackville, Preston Chechachook.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my colleague for his question. You know, I agree. There's no question that we have we're challenged with the change in demographic in the sense that there are more and more seniors today, and as we move forward, there will be even more, which is in my riding was the highest increase in the last 5 years in Nova Scotia. So we have to do much more for seniors. But the example he gave is that they're also the country that has the 3rd or 4th highest taxes in the world. So we have to be careful, find a balanced approach, and it's many, many prongs that will do that. Thank you.
Questions et commentaires. Quick question. The Honourable Member for Spadina, Fort York, in 30 seconds, and hopefully a 30-second response as well.
I also note that one of the taxes the Netherlands has is a carbon tax, but we will put that off to another day, another debate. They too have priced pollution, and they've also eliminating cars in the downtown core by 2030. But they also have an incredibly aggressive housing program in the Netherlands. And I wonder if the member opposite could reflect on the fact that we've spent $5.6 billion so far. We have 14,000 units of housing approved, under construction, or built. And in particular, when it comes to seniors, 12,000 of the 60,000 units that will be built under the National Housing Strategy are dedicated for seniors, including 20% of the units being universally accessible for people to age in place and age comfortably, even if they have disabilities now, but also into the future. And whether those programs are also things that the member opposite supports and sees as important ways to reduce poverty in this country.
Well, member for Sackville, Preston Chechachook, in 30 seconds or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And my colleague is exactly right. We have invested $5.6 billion, and there's no question that I'm seeing it in my riding where seniors and housing, but we're also answering to many vulnerable people, as I indicated. We're also speaking about veterans, we're speaking about seniors, we're speaking about people with disabilities. This is the investment is very great, it's very high, but the investment is over time because it takes time to build these units as we move forward. Thank you.
Reprise du débat, resuming debate, l'honorable député.
The Honourable Member for Cartier. The member has about 9.5 minutes, and then we'll have to wrap up the debate. The honourable member. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to salute or acknowledge rather the member for Sackville, who's very colourful when he speaks. But unfortunately, he's once again demonstrating that Liberals have no plan and their spending is out of control. Mr. Speaker, I'm speaking to Bill C-87 today, an act respecting the reduction of poverty. In the legislative summary, it says that on the 6th of November, the minister tabled the bill. And this act provides for a metric and other metrics to measure the level of poverty in Canada. It sets out 2 poverty reduction targets in Canada and establishes the National Advisory Council on Poverty. From the outset, Mr. Speaker, I have to say that, yes, there is poverty in Canada. It's all very well to have a National Advisory Council. It's all very well to have targets and establish various institutions that will measure and assess and consult. But, Mr. Speaker, I can confirm for the government today that, yes, there is poverty in Canada. 1 Canadian out of 6, unfortunately, is in need, and I think it's very important to remember that and to establish necessary measures to meet the real needs of these people. Now, the National Advisory Council will be established under this bill. And this council will be a full-time committee, and its members will be employees of the Government of Canada. So once again, spending is being added, and this money will serve the government machine before it serves the needs of poor people. That's what's unfortunate. We're not against helping those who live in poverty. On the contrary, but we have to help them, not the Liberal government machine. It's not necessary to legislate to change the way the government measures poverty. We all know that there are people living in poverty in Canada. Now, what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do tomorrow morning to improve the comfort and quality of life of these Canadians who have the right to be respected? Mr. Speaker, under the existing structures and system, we could have done that. We could have done it quickly, practically. But no, the government simply prefers to establish more levels of government. It wants to create an official poverty line. Well, that could work in favor of the government because it will lead people to believe certain things. You know, it likes to wave its wand and kind of throw this smoke and stardust at Canadians. But, you know, the same will happen with, in this case, as with balancing the budget. Who knows when it'll happen? In 2015, this government was campaigning and at the time said to Canadian citizens that it would run a modest deficit. And in 2019, that budget would be balanced. We now know that we don't know when it will be balanced. So in this House, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to say that was misrepresentation on the part of the government. More than 1,000 people representing communities throughout Canada attended workshops during a meeting with the Minister of Labour and Employment. There were small group discussions that took place on over 40 topics. Well, once again, these people are working daily with people who are vulnerable, and they have solutions. And they're saying that what will happen under this legislation will not meet the purpose set out in this bill. Our leader, Mr. Scheer, what I meant was our leader of the official opposition, I forgot the name of his riding, Regina Capel, brought in a bill for new parents and taxes on maternity leave. Now, that was one step, one measure amongst many that would have been practical. You see, we in the Conservative Party work to help real people, workers, people in need. We're willing and able to work with them and find practical solutions rather than build these various organizations and structures, rather than weigh down the whole administration. We can find practical solutions. On the other side, they just find money and they throw it here and there, but it doesn't get to the right places. I could recommend measures. I mean, my colleague from Quebec could simply ask me for recommendations. It would give me great pleasure to make suggestions to him. Mr. Speaker, this government wants to help those most in need. However, they're eliminating certain tax credits that would have helped these families. They've eliminated income splitting and the tax credit for phys ed for children, the tax credit to help with post-secondary studies. Mr. Speaker, we in the Conservative Party will support effective, efficient measures, but this government is simply proposing more metrics, more structures, more levels, more consultations to figure out how they can do whatever. But on the ground, they're not doing anything, and people deserve assistance from the Canadian government. These are people deserving of respect. We should be creating jobs that will help them with their self-respect, their sense of value. It will help them rise above and help society rise. And these people can be part of that. Now, I extend my hand to them. However, the government isn't putting in place any system that will help them with that. Mr. Speaker, there's much inconsistency here. And the government wants to help those most in need, but unfortunately its spending is out of control. And I'm going to show you what I mean by this waste on the part of the Liberal government. They spent, Mr. Speaker, $500,000 to create a logo, a brand, and a logo for their department abroad. $500,000, Mr. Speaker. So this National Advisory Council is supposed to be helping, but first they're going to put $500,000 in it, not to help those who are most in need, not to help people, simply just to find a good way to brand it. $4.5 billion to buy an old pipeline. Could they have helped some people with that? Thousands of dollars, $210,000 for their book cover for the budget. On the 19th of September 2018, the PM bought bottles and bottles of wine and beer and $340,000 worth of food for a little international stay. Aga Khan, $127,000. I mean, that's what we found out, but perhaps it was more than that. We weren't really given the full picture. Furthermore, I see you're pointing out that I only have 1 minute left, but the PM's tweet, I wanted to add, welcome to Canada, will be costing Canada because of all the illegal migrants crossing the border. $1.1 billion. I could come up with more numbers. My colleague put all kinds of numbers across the way in his remarks. Well, I can put some there too. And I can show this, and I can show the waste that's going on. So we agree on finding solutions, Mr. Speaker. On the weekend, there will be all kinds of organizations throughout my riding who will be collecting money. And on Sunday morning, I'll be doing that in Saint-Augustin and Sainte-Catherine-Jacques-Cartier to raise money to help the poor. That is a concrete step, but this government isn't able to deliver. It's always just bringing forward its philosophies, but we'll vote for so that we can move forward. But I hope that the government is hearing what I'm saying. I hope it will improve this bill so it meets the needs of those who need it most. It being 1:30 p.m., the government will now proceed to private members' business. Point of order, the member for Hochelaga. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
House is normally reluctant to circumvent the PMB process by giving unanimous consent to PMB bills. But today we're faced with an extraordinary situation where the next bill we're about to debate, S-234, has no sponsor and will be killed if it doesn't get unanimous consent. Since this bill is also totally uncontroversial, I'm hoping we can pass it at all stages without using any more of the House's most precious resource, which is time. Alors, Monsieur le Président, il y a eu des discussions.
Mr. Speaker, there were discussions among the parties, and I hope I will obtain unanimous consent for the following motion. That notwithstanding any standing order or usual practice of the House, Bill S-234, an act to amend the Parliament of Canada Act, Parliamentary Visual Artist Laureate, will be deemed read a second time and referred to a committee, deemed read and considered in that committee, brought back with no amendments, and will be deemed adopted at third reading and adopted. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the honourable member have unanimous consent for the motion, to propose a motion? We do not have unanimous consent rather. Private members' business. Second reading of Bill S-234, an act to amend the Parliament of Canada Act, Parliamentary Visual Artist Laureate. The House still has not designated a sponsor for Bill S-234, an act to amend the Parliament of Canada Act, Parliamentary Visual Artist Laureate, and therefore, according to my statement on Monday, 17th of September, the bill will be dropped from the order paper, according to the standing orders. It being 1:32 p.m.
Until next Monday at 11 a.m. pursuant to Standing Order 24-1. Souhaite tous une bonne fin de semaine.
Have a good weekend, everyone.